1, Monday, December 2nd, 2019, in City Hall Council Chambers at 7 p.m. Please rise for the invocation and remain standing for the flag salute. Heavenly Father, tonight we turn our thoughts and prayers, first of all, to the family of Riley McDowell and the violence that occurred this week in our city again. It's been a very eventful year in that respect, Lord, and not in a good way. But we pray for your strength and your comfort to the family, Lord, and friends, and those affected by this, which of course we all are affected by this. But we pray, Lord God, that you help us find a way through this, not just to bear up under it, but, Lord, to find solutions. Violence in our society is a problem. Reacting violently to one another is unfortunately becoming more and more frequent and more accepted in certain realms and promoted in others. We pray for that to turn around, Lord God. We could be a people of compassion and peace towards each other, and people that truly does show love for our fellow man. For whatever reason we're in the situations we are or they are. We ask all that tonight, Lord God, in the name of Jesus. Father, as we also move into the budget tonight, it really is a transitional budget, evidenced by the seating of 3 new council people who are here tonight and a present council member who's going to become mayor. We are a city government in transition. Father, we pray that through this budget session tonight and going forward, you'll help all of us to work together, to cooperate together, and to come forward with the best solution that we all see for our city moving forward into 2020. We ask for wisdom and direction, and we ask it in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For those watching on TV at home or are going to see this later, we're going to have a budget session tonight, a budget session Wednesday night, and then a council meeting Thursday night at 7:30, where we will have our first vote on the budget for 2020. We have seated 3 new council people that will, 3 council people elect who will be new council people in January, and they will be asking questions that arise or come to them or that they've already prepared to ask during the budget. Just one item about the budget. The Finance Department has prepared for us narratives on certain sections of the budget, whole groups, and that answer questions that we might have ahead of time and give us background on why certain changes were made, why certain things were met or not met, and it's been very helpful. So you may hear us, one or more of us, refer to those things at time, and just so you understand that's something that's in our packet. And we're grateful for the work they did. Mr. Nichols and Mr. Pavlak worked diligently to give us a lot of information, and we certainly appreciate it. So without further ado, we will move to item 3, the 2020 budget review. And first up is the Utility Fund, River Valley Transit Binder, and Mr. Nichols is front and center.
Good evening, President Allison, Vice President Mealy, and members of Council, Council-elect. I'm pleased to present the RBT budget for 2020, and included with our budget presentations information which provides you with a sort of a background perspective and a context for what goes into our annual budget development. We have in there service highlights to performance standards, grants, and description of proposed capital projects. As you said, President Allison, I do want to thank all the department heads for working with the Finance Department to provide you with much more information about departmental operations, fleet rosters, and proposed efficiency measures. I especially want to thank Joe. He spent countless hours putting this budget together, providing you with a new format that provides much more information relative to the budget, such as line item descriptions, budget highlights, and comparative budget information in terms of a 5-year budget trend for different line items and current year expenditures to put next year's budget in better perspective. So starting with page 1 of RBT's budget, you'll see on the first page we provide you with our projected revenues. On this page, the revenues are itemized and represent RVT's approved state and federal operating budget for fiscal year 2020. Also included is our demonstration grant for service in Clinton County, and for both fiscal year 19 revenues and expenditures, the actual estimate comes from the city's audit process. So the first line in bus fares for fiscal year 20 is $935,015. This is determined by our projected ridership, current service levels, and any fare adjustments that are made. Advertising, $30,000. This is revenue generated primarily from the sale of bus boards. Next line, ADA passenger fares, $15,000, which are collected by STEP, as they do provide our ADA paratransit complimentary service. Other bus charters, $15,000. Other income, $2,500. Our operating subsidy federal, $2,200,000. From the state, $4,766,365. And that includes money for the demonstration grant of $292,954. Operating subsidy municipal from our 19 different partners, $405,909. Operating subsidy other, $43,943, which is a match to the demonstration grant. Interest income is $1,500. Program income, $350,000 with a transfer of planning budget for various planning expenses of $218,032 for a total revenue of $8,547,200. And then projected expenditures come in 3 different categories as defined by the federal government: administration, vehicle operations, and maintenance. Want me to keep going?
Questions on the first page, anyone?
One quick question.
Ms. Mealy.
Mr. Nichols, remind me again, is the planning budget entirely separate from this particular utility element, or where does planning fall under the projected expenditure?
There's a page, it's coming up.
Okay, so it wouldn't be in these numbers?
No.
Okay.
No, it wouldn't be. We have to
then
keep
the-
that separate because including their contracted services such as best transit, parking
Understood,
authority.
but I guess what I'm confused about is that we're showing the income from the state, the 411,130, which shows up in the planning budget in this fiscal year, and the 353,912, which shows up in the planning budget for 2020 from Clinton County.
Well, I show that in both places.
Okay, but I guess the totals for the expenditures, for the projected expenditures for the basic administration, vehicle operations, and maintenance cost incorporate that money.
Yes.
Okay.
The demonstration grant only.
Yeah, but then how are we booking into the planning budget too? Or are we booking it out of the planning budgets?
It's just
Somewhere
shown
in
in and
that.
out in the planning budget.
Okay.
I just,
Got it.
it's the same,
we
revenues
book it
equals
out.
expenditures,
Got
so
it.
it's a net zero.
Okay,
I just show that because that's how I showed it last year.
got it.
But
And why-
I'm
and
trying
why-
to be more informative. I put that in because these are the approved budgets from the state and federal government, so I
No,
wanted to
that's
have.
good, it's helpful, I'm just trying to understand where the money's
Yeah.
moving around. If I can then ask one further question about that. Do we anticipate the amount, obviously we anticipate the amount to decrease in
2020. Is there a reason for that, just because the state?
Well, the first year was a full year and 3 months. So that's why it was a little bit more. It started, I think, in February, and our fiscal year ends June. So that first year, correct, it does show more because there was an extra 3 or 4 months added in there.
Got it. So the yearly total is 353,912.
Right.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes,
Under,
Mr. Henderson?
just on that first page there, the municipal, that's operating subsidy there, that's 19 partners.
yes.
I think I asked this last year, and I'm just wondering, would you tell us how much of that is coming from the city of Williamsport, as in this government here?
$210,000.
210?
Yeah, and I think, as I mentioned in previous years, we've been able to keep that the same for about 20-some years because we keep adding partners. Original partners were only 8, and
Yeah.
now, and being prepared for the next question, do you mind providing us with a copy of the shares of the municipal? I just happen to have that here.
Oh, you do? Hey, that's great. That's wonderful. Thank you.
So moving on, you'll see, yeah, there's a list of 19 different partners, and we've been and that's in addition to we have partners in Clinton County, the college, the county, the city, UPMC, and then of course we have partners up in Best Transit as well. So we probably have over 30 different partners, in the 5-county area, which is something, I guess. So moving on to administration, which is the second page, and you can see for personnel services, the total is $1,991,500, and that consists of administrative salaries, various benefits, life insurance, health insurance, actually health insurance for all employees, FICA, pensions, physical exams, which are required by DOT, and unemployment compensation. Again, the total is $1,991,500. Under purchase of services, we have telephone, travel, light and power, building, service contracts, which has increased dramatically from a budget of $125,000 mid-year. STEP, as I mentioned, does provide our 8-day complimentary transportation services, and they provide the shared ride services throughout the county. A determination was made by the state that we had to pick up the PWD contract, persons with disabilities, so we have to foot that cost, unfortunately, so that raised our total cost associated with our paratransit services to $192,000, which is projected for next year. Hearings litigation also has included planning transfer, $450,000, subscription and dues, administrative services, which is provided to the city, and auditing services. We pick up a portion of the city's single audit as well as other requirements, reports, what have you, that are mandated by the state and federal government. So purchase services is $866,000. The administration part of our budget. And then on the next page, you see supplies and materials. That total is $313,500, and that consists of general office supplies, insurance, building, heat for our facility, which has gone down dramatically because our facility now is heated by used oil. So that's been a very big cost savings. Facility maintenance for our 5 different facilities, and contingency for a total of that section of $313,500, as I said, and a total for administration of $3,171,000.
Questions on pages 2 or 3? Mrs. Katz?
On your planning, what is the planning? Is that-
Planning, if you look at our salary detail, that's all the personnel that not only provide, obviously, our core services, but also our contract services, such as our CFO, who not only does for RVT, but other entities, Best Transit, our facility managers, I'd have to look at the salary detail, there's quite a few. Kevin Kilpatrick, our planning manager, our customer service, marketing person, our compliance manager, April, also our special service managers that deal with best transit, as
So
well
this-
as our,
This incorporates a lot of different people then.
those are the people that we segregate out of the Bureau of Transportation personnel, which are solely Bureau of Transportation. Under the planning, those are people that have more than just responsibilities with RVT, but like I said, best transit, parking authority, our facilities, and things like that. It's required because of cost allocation. We have to keep that separate.
And the administrative, can I still?
Yeah.
Administrative services, you said that's for the city? For,
Administrative support,
yes.
that's an amount of money that we figure we could provide back to the city for services that are provided.
Like IT and things like that, are you talking?
Well, not IT, controller's office, treasurer, city clerk, finance, anybody that does something for RVT. We've been able to come up with a way to give back to the city an amount of money each year towards their, community development used to do that as well until their funding got cut back dramatically, and they're capped at 20% of their budget for administrative services. So at one time they provide administrative support as well, but unfortunately, with less and less money, they were not able to provide that. They also provided money for codes as well. At one point it was $100,000 a year, now it's down to $20,000 this year. So again, that's just grants management. We've been able to find a way to get back to the city in terms of some services provided,
Okay,
as well as city council. So, we paid for the pencil.
Wait, I don't have a pencil.
Oh, I don't pay for that. Oh, and the Christmas decorations, I understand that they,
Oh, my word.
yeah.
Mr. Pelisi.
Administrative salaries, how many administrative personnel is that?
That includes, under the Bureau of Transportation, includes general manager, office manager, the IT manager, assistant managers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 individuals.
Other questions?
Under,
Carry on.
on page 3, or I should say 4, I think we're up to. Vehicle operations, supervision, as well as driver's wages, which are both for buses and vans, and workers' comp. The total is $2,900,000. Under purchase of services, we have our training safety programs, also money that is used to balance the trade and transit center budgets of $650,000 for a subtotal of $720,000. And then supplies and materials, that subtotal is $719,200, and that includes bus fuel. Right now, about 80% of our fuel is CNG. And our fuel budget used to be almost double what you see there, so CNG has really been a considerable savings over the years. We now have 23 CNG buses, so we're almost have a total conversion at this point in time. 4 more will be a total conversion once we are able to secure funding for that procurement. Oil and grease is also included, shop equipment, uniforms, printing copies, advertising, which includes a variety of things, like all our media advertising, marketing services, our promotions, outreach programs, our ride guides, and all the different publications that we have. Insurance for our fleet, which is provided through Safety, which is a statewide consortium of transit systems. As part of self-insured, $140,000, and insurance drivers is $200, and again, that subtotal is $719,200 for a total of operations of $4,339,200.
Questions on page 4? Mr. Henderson?
Under supervision there, our actual was 394,715. The budget was 336,200, and that's up quite a bit there. Can you explain that? And then also, I'm wondering, what's the process for spending more than what was budgeted and transferred? Does that make sense?
Well, again, we're on a cross between 2 fiscal years, so to speak, and these are approved state and federal government budgets, so we do have to do internal transfers as the year goes on. But that money comes out of other places where there's been a savings or there's been additional revenue. As far as supervisors, what happened there is our assistant general manager retired, and so one of the supervisors, we now include all the supervisors because the assistant general manager was in that particular line item, so we left him in that particular line item. So that reflects, again, the assistant general manager who's no longer, who's retired, was replaced by one of the supervisors. So that additional money was put into that budget. And I think it came out of, if you look at, if you look at administrative salaries was reduced, down from budget was $319,000 down to $308,000. So again, there was a reorganization when our assistant general manager retired and a current supervisor took his position, and so all the supervision is now in that particular line item.
So that's just an internal transfer. Okay. I'm just wondering, I mean, if we set a budget, and shouldn't any transfer come back to the budget that we set here in council?
Well, again, you're talking about 2 fiscal years. You can see we've added van drivers. When the new budget was approved by the federal and state government, we had to gear up for additional services that we're mandated to provide. So,
I'm not questioning the reason, just the process. Because I think, had the reasoning been brought to council, I think we would have been very amenable, to make those transfers.
frankly, I'm not sure how I would have done that. But what I wanted to do this year is I'm showing the actual budgets that were approved by the
Yeah.
federal and state government, which was not the way I did it before. It was trying to do a hybrid of 2 fiscal years. So this year, what I did is I wanted to show you the exact budgets that were approved, as well as the exact estimates and budget estimates that were audited. So again,
Yeah.
sort of I'm trying
Well,
to transition into.
Yeah, and I appreciate, the more information. It's very, very helpful. It's wonderful to see all this. I wonder, do you have a perspective on that, Mr. Lubin?
I believe within our codified ordinances, within a department, I think they're allowed to transfer money up to 5%. So if you look at their total budget, this is well within that 5%.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you. Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you. Mhm.
Mrs. Katz?
Insurance for the drivers, $200?
Yeah, I know, that's.
I'd like $200.
Well, that is a separate, it's in the contract to have felonious assault insurance, which is a very small amount. It's really part of our package policy, which it's if there is a crime committed on a driver, that there's coverage for that.
It's only $200, though.
Yeah, it's just an investment out of our package policy. I just put it in there to assure the union that it's there, there's coverage there. The exact breakout of the cost of that now in a package policy, I'm not sure what it is.
So
but
it has nothing to do with their driving or anything?
No. It's if there's a crime committed on the bus driver, it would cover medical or whatever costs that would be detrimental to the individual. We've never had a claim like that, but it's just something that sort of transit has in place, I guess. It's sort of a broad term, I guess, felonious assault, but, if a driver's held up or something like that, if you lost personal property or something, I presume that's what it would cover.
Thank you.
Mr. Nichols, I had a couple informational questions. Training and safety, is RVT under OSHA
No.
regulations?
No, we're under a lot of DOT regulations for training and safety
Yeah.
because of CDL and drug and alcohol testing and defensive driving and sleep
Right.
apnea, and there is a number of programs and through our safety program with the state that are mandates. All our supervisors go through Penn Train, which is a program, a supervisor training process. So it's quite comprehensive. We also have our annual safety and awards banquet we've been doing for 42 years. National Safety Council, it's a pretty exhaustive list of different training, which is good. I mean,
Right.
but the federal and state government keep adding on those responsibilities. It used to be, you didn't even require a CDL license at one point in time, but that, obviously has changed over the years. So,
Yeah, okay, thank you with that. The advertising, is that all done in-house?
it mostly is now. We used to use a marketing agency,
Yeah.
but we've cut that back dramatically because we have more capability in-house now. So, especially because of and I put some of those marketing materials in the binder to show, because we have different ride guides for different areas that we provide service. We do a lot of promotions. This year was our 50th anniversary of being a public transportation agency, so we do most of it. Even with our ride guides, we're able to print them in-house now, so for the most part. Now, some of the materials, which, we print a lot of, we would go outside for printing purposes, but in terms of creativity, we do most of that in-house.
Okay, good, thank you, that's all I have. Any other? Mr. Pelizzi?
One question again. Driver's wages. How many drivers does RVT currently have?
We have some part-time van drivers. It's a total of full-time equivalents, about 40 now.
Ms. Mealy?
And I just have one question on the salary detail as well. There's, and maybe it's a point more of confusion. I'm assuming there's been some transition at RVT over the past year. There are a lot of salaries that have increased by what I would consider to be more or less a cost of living increase. But then there are some, the assistant general manager, whose salary jumped from 32,000 to 73.
Well, again, he retired at the beginning
Right.
of the year. So
Okay.
he was full-time until February or March, and then the salary that's reflective there now is the supervisor that assumed his role.
So the
for-
32,000 is actually a part-year salary?
Yes.
Okay. And I guess similarly, there are a handful of salaries that are decreasing. I don't know if that's related to a new hire in the
Well, we've got,
position?
we've have some reorganization. Let's see, I'm trying to see which one you're looking at.
Excuse me, here I can, well,
Well, the
there's,
customer service salesperson, Kate Tinney,
Yeah.
retired, so we have a new person in that position, so obviously it's a lot less.
the assistant office manager,
Assistant office.
down ever so slightly, it just, but that's such a rare trend for our salaries to go down.
Well, those are, office man, again, those, one of them is a new person in a position, so theirs was decreased, in
Better.
terms of entry level.
Understood. Okay. And you say the increase in the shared ride call center folks and the bus and van drivers is related to the new paratransit requirements?
If you recall, the call center opened up in February, and the dispatch and scheduling all that used to be up in Athens, in Bradford County, was moved down here as part of the new software program called EcoLane, and it's now all, for those of you who've been there, know it's all computerized, and the amount of call intake has increased dramatically because we have much more lines going in there, and you know, all the program requirements from the state and what we've had to do, and the actual shared ride part of our organization has increased dramatically, and so we've been gearing up as needed. So we did have one person come down from Athens and transfer down from there into the call center. So if you haven't seen the call center, it's a pretty amazing operation. We are able to track everything through ABL, all the vans in a 5-county area, and we have anywhere from 400 to 500 trips scheduled daily.
Yeah.
And so our call intake, and you'll see some of them are temps, and it's, yeah, it's quite an operation now.
And describe to me, did the new paratransit requirements and sort of the shifting over to RVT of those responsibilities, did that come with any, I mean, I'm just looking at, we've added 9 new employees this year, at least 8 of them would appear to be related to that. So that's a significant increased cost to RVT on an annual basis.
It's a significant cost, and we're looking internally as to whether or not are the ADA trip making that we're responsible, and when we've always contracted through STEP, as well as now the PWD trips. We've been gearing up that we're now in a position with our shared ride operation to take over that responsibility and coordinate it with STEP. Recently, we just met up in Lock Haven with an organization that is sort of a work center for disabled individuals, and they want to give up their transportation. Lock Haven University wants to give up their transportation, so we're sort of at a crossroads here in terms of the demands of, you know, mobility demands that people are asking us to do. So it's, you know, we obviously have to work with the state in terms of funding, but we try to take small steps so we don't get overwhelmed. But as you can see, it's starting to make an impact, which is good, but we got to make sure we can manage it.
I was going to say, and you do see our funding increasing. That is to say that we're able to cover that through grant funding. Obviously, we're not covering it through.
Well, for example, a demonstration grant, which we were fortunate to receive, there's not too many of those that the state provides, but what you have to show is that the demonstration grant period, which is 3 years, is successful in what they'll do. In fact, we just had a midterm review by PennDOT, and you have to set performance goals up front. And as long as you, at the end of the 3-year period, show that you've met those goals, then they will turn that demonstration annual funding into your permanent grant making. So, so that'll be a decision we have to make in a year and a half, whether we want to continue on, which I think with the support of Clinton County and the various partners we have up there, I don't see any reason why we wouldn't, because we've gotten a really good response from everybody so far.
But so you're saying that paratransit would function much the same way? And that if we were looking to take on further paratransit responsibilities, we would look at receiving a
Under
demonstration grant?
ADA, when we started out, under the ADA rule back in 1991, what you had to do is, even though your buses are accessible, you had to provide complimentary paratransit service. And what that means, within 3/4 of a mile of a bus route, if someone could demonstrate through a certification process they were unable, for whatever reason, to go to the bus stop and wait for a bus, then they would qualify for van service or door-to-door service. And so we still certify all the trip making at RVT, and then we turn over authorization to STEP for them to actually do the trip making. But it's now gotten to a point where with the added burden of PWD program and extending service into Clinton County, which means that opens the door to ADA trips in Clinton County, it makes more sense for us to look at providing that service ourselves. So the state has been pushing for STEP and ourselves to maybe better coordinate and integrate services. That's why we're you know, working with Best Transit now in Clinton County, because the state wants to regionalize, and they're making incentives available to do that. And if you don't take advantage of the incentives, then they will take away funding. So it sort of puts you in a bind, but, you know, as long as you have, you know, good plans and, you know, make sure that you're not overextending yourself, then it's a smart thing to do.
Okay. Got it. That's everything. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I just had a general question. You have a breakdown here for the local shares. Am I to assume that we could get a breakdown of any other line item if we
Sure.
wanted to see
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
I was just curious. The advertising line is the only one that was exactly what it was budgeted.
Yeah, you'll see
Yeah.
Sun Gazette. We do a lot of advertising with them. Media, iHeart, Backyard Broadcasting. You know, we have our promotions for the bonus buck promotion for senior citizens, which is very, if anybody has anybody they know that rides a bus in the senior citizen program, you'll know that they know all about that. And so it's, we're strongly encouraged to have a marketing program, you know, that's ride guides. You know, we print the major ride, well, we have more than one ride guide. We have 3 different ride guides, but the major ride guide is the one we have here, and we print 100,000 of those, so we source that out. So it's, of course, our website and all the web services and that type of thing is included in that as well.
Mr. Pelisi?
Crunching some numbers here real quick. When you look at currently our transportation supervisors, currently we have 5.
Correct. Right, yeah.
2019, their proposed cost was $281,786. We're looking to keep the same number of transportation supervisors, yet decrease the proposed cost down to $260,272.
Right.
Am I correct?
Yes, we moved some of that up there, the assistant general manager, those costs.
Okay. So, I was just
Essentially,
wondering-
we've eliminated a position, because I don't really, we took one of the current supervisors, again, promoted him to be the, you know, the assistant general manager, so to speak. And so we haven't added that extra position in yet. So that's why, and I don't think we're going to do that right away, so there is a savings there. That makes sense. Because that, originally, the person that's shown as assistant general manager was in the transportation supervisors. That makes sense. Probably doesn't.
The numbers are still the same, though.
What's that?
We're still showing 5 and 1.
Yeah, eventually, I have another, well, yeah, there's going to be another supervisor retiring here in April. And so, you know, there will be a point in time where I'm going to be hiring someone to take his place, so they'll both be employed at the same time. But in terms of right now, whether we'll go to the 5 and the 1, I don't plan on that right now, and so we just see how it works out. I think because of the other positions we have, I'm not sure we need that extra position back yet, so it's sort of, I guess in flux is the best way I can say it.
The question I had, Mr. Nichols, is, so when you take the average of the training and transportation supervisors that we have, I just look at the average, it was 56,357. What we're proposed is an average of 52,054. And then I look down here at how many current bus and van drivers we have at 35, correct? And,
I think it's 40 now.
okay. I apologize, I was looking at the current figure and it
Right,
said
right.
35. As the number proposed, it said 40. Okay.
For each new individual, there's a 3-month training period. It's quite extensive because of all the requirements. So, I mean, we do, you never can spend enough on training and safety, you know, but it's, again, that's for not only supervision, but the drivers, mechanics, and for all personnel, training and safety. It's not just for drivers. If that was your question. I don't,
Okay.
that's for everybody. All 90 individuals, I think, we're training.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Mr. Nichols, Would you spend just a minute and describe to this council and to the community the relationship between RVT and the city?
In the
It's
city?
The city. It's changed dramatically in the last 10 years.
Yeah, it has, because it used to be, when I started a couple years ago, that's a joke. Anyway. No, when we started out as a public transportation system back in 1969, it was, August 8th of 1969, when the city of Williamsport started operating the public transportation service from a private carrier, which was, every transit system was private and would turn public, as all transportation programs did at that time.
So at that time, it was private. There was no connection between the city and the
No,
transportation.
Edwards Lake City owned both the intra-city and the intercity, and that was very similar to all transit agencies around the country, where private companies just couldn't make it anymore because of the cost consideration. I mean, that's the same time where transportation, when transportation became a big part of the federal government, was airports and highways and railroads became public, and that's when the National Highway Program, Interstate Program also was being developed. So there was, typically what happened back then was that authorities were formed, but Mayor Carey at the time was a very strong advocate of the bus system, and so the city secured a grant of $75,000 to purchase the bus system from Edwards Lake to Sea. And from there, in 1971, we got a grant to build our facility, which is up on West 3rd Street. Now, obviously, that's been improved considerably over the years, but it was a small building up there back, as I said, 1971. Then in the late 70s, there was the first partnership formed between the local municipalities, between the city of Loyalstock, Matorsville, Southside, Du Bois Town, Old Township, where a formula was developed that each would pay their fair share based on mileage operated in a particular jurisdiction. That's where when I came on the scene and we finished that negotiating. And then over the years, we started expanding services. The first time we expanded services was in 1988 to Mole and Muncie, and then shortly thereafter was Hughesville and Montgomery, and, you know, on and on. So, and we kept adding partners. The Williamsport Home became a partner. The health system became a partner. Anytime we could add someone, the Williamsport, as I said, the Williamsport Home became a partner. And so anybody, Weiss Markets even was a small partner. Anytime that we could expand services or was requested to expand services, we asked them to contribute so we could keep adding local partners to keep the local share the same for Williamsport. So, and so that's the way it's been. And then the state, a few years back, 2011, approached us about managing bus transit. Again, they were pushing regionalization, so it wasn't a mandate, but it was close to it. They were failing, so we were able to, structure that partnership. And then the Clinton County, again, Clinton County was the only third-class city, or Lock Haven was the only third-class city that didn't have transportation services in the Commonwealth. And so we were approached by them, and so it's become a 5-county agency, and now the 5 counties below us are, including Geisinger, wants us to provide services down there, so we're looking at that possibility. But I think getting to your question is the state is somewhat, I wouldn't say uncomfortable, but for us to continue to expand, they want to see more of a situation where it recognizes that there's more than one funding partner than just the city. Obviously, the city is a big part of that, obviously, and I don't want to lose the connectivity with the city of Williamsport, because there's a lot of benefits by having RVT under the umbrella of the city. But there's other ways of creating an organization that recognizes that, you know, there's commissioners in Clinton County and Bradford, Sullivan, Tioga, you know, they oversee, or, you know, they're the controlling board up there. So there's a lot of partners, the county, and so trying to come up maybe with an organizational that recognizes that the city of Williamsport is the key partner, but also recognizes the investment made by many, many other agencies. And so for us to take advantage of funds and expansion and opportunities, the state wants us to be there first, because otherwise they're going to go to somebody else to do it. and then we lose the opportunity to become a stronger organization, and which does have benefits to the city, there's no doubt about it.
Who owns RVT?
The city, well, the assets are really owned by the federal government and the state. As far as the, the organization in terms of management, it's under the umbrella of the city right now, as well as the other agencies that have been very, they understand that the city, is the primary overseer of RVT, but they feel, I've been thrilled that the commissioners of all these different counties feel comfortable with that and are working with us, to provide these services. So it's a very strange situation, to say the least.
If RVT were to financially go belly up, who would be responsible for that?
If what now?
If RVT went into financial stress, who would be responsible for that? I think there's a...
Are you talking about my stress or RVT stress?
We know that you're stressed. We're just wondering if the RVT, who would be responsible for that? Would the city be responsible? Would the state? Would the federal government? Who would be responsible?
I'm not sure how there would be any situation like that.
Okay.
Otherwise, what they would do is they'd have some other operating entity take it over, I guess, and remove the city from being the grantee, which would not be a good thing because
Because I think it's fascinating that we look at this budget so very carefully. It's big business. It's not little business. It's
No,
big
it's
business.
yeah.
And it's a business that we as a city don't really operate.
There's a lot of, there's the federal, state, all the regulations of government. There's many more rules and procedures and requirements from the state and federal government than the
Correct.
city has. It's from procurement to, drug and alcohol, all the different compliance. If you see in there, I put in there about our last federal audit that happens every 3 years. I mean, they analyze everything, and if you don't pass, you're in trouble. But then there's the benefit to the city, which I think is very important, is that because of being part of the city, then, the most recognizable thing is the economic development component that we're able to do with the city. Because, we've always, every mayor, administration and council has saw the benefit, that we can leverage transit grants to do bigger projects like Coles. That was a leverage project with transit grants, as well as Church Street, train transit. All the streetscape went through RVT as a PennDOT enhancement grant. So there's a lot of benefits in terms of consultants. I would not want to see a total separation from the city because I think they would lose a lot of benefits that they now have. Of course, things are changing dramatically, but I think if you look at everything in total, in terms of what we're able to do by being part of the city is extremely important. And I would, and I've always been against, and when PennDOT, keeps advocating for something like an authority, I've not been for that because of the benefits that I think the city now has and deserves because they were the ones that started the system.
Thank
I'm not sure that answers your question.
You did.
But
Thank you.
Let me follow up on, sorry. Let me follow up on your question, Councilman Fosnot. I know we were talking a lot about there's incentives out there for us to expand RVT. To your point, though, Councilwoman Fosnot, 75-ish% of our revenue, it's from the federal and state government. And political winds can change within a couple of years. What would happen if they would just go away in the next 2 to 4 years when elections come, new administrations come in? Who would be on the hook for that? Because that's $6.5 million.
Then back in the Reagan years, when he first came president in 1981, there was Reaganomics, there was a dramatic cut in federal operating assistance. And we had to eliminate all our night service. Basically, our policy, unless the locals would want to provide additional funding, but my personal view on that is that we would never look to the local share for the city's not changed in over 20 years. And we return every dollar that the city invests in RVT, they get $4 back in various ways, whether, things we pay for. So if it ever come to a point where the dollars would dry up, I don't see that ever happening, but let's just say if it would, then you cut services, you eliminate it. As simple as that. To me, it's primarily a federal and state program with the locals putting in a small percentage to leverage that. And all the strong partnerships that we've developed over the years, I would never, that would be for someone else to want to solve that problem, because that's not something I would advocate. We would have to cut services, clearly.
And a follow-up question to that, something you had mentioned, as RVT evolves, as the state drives a little bit of that, it sounds like, you've referenced you wanted to keep that connection with the city. In your mind, what does that look like? I mean, maybe the more straightforward question is, in your mind, over the next, say, 4 years, 6 years, what do you see River Valley Transit evolving into? What does that structure look like? What does that...
Well, in the binder that I provided, there is like a executive summary of what we've been looking at, and that's based on a couple models in the state, and that would be a management authority where key administrative personnel would be part of the authority. And so drivers, mechanics, what have you, still be employees of the city. And best drivers and mechanics would be employees of best authority, and whatever areas provide service, employees that were employed, in terms of operations would remain the same, but you'd have some management individuals. You would contract with this management operation to provide the services. So, and you'd have a board that would be comprised of, recognize who are the primary partners into the system. It would be pretty seamless, but it would make more sense, I think. But that's up to the administration, to, the partners in RVT, and, that's something that, and I put like a working paper in there, some thoughts on that. So obviously council and the mayor and others would have to react to that and see what's in best interest. But I think the city wants to protect itself from losing any value that they have in the RVT, I guess. So it's a big question, the answers, but I think there's a solution. We could do an IPO. I'm just
I think that might not go well for any of us.
I think you're scaring her. I think you're scaring the new mayor. I hope not. But, no, it's a big question. I mean, the thing is I like about it is, to be frank, is that we were sort of the first regionalization effort in this community, and I think whether it be public safety or whatever have you, it has to be regionalization. You've got to share costs. I mean, that's just, we've been talking about for public safety and other things. I think clearly Trans has demonstrated that can happen. I mean, Loyalstock's a partner, been a partner for many, many years, Montoursville, the hospital, whatever. They're all participating in this strong partnership to support a needed service for our community. And I don't see why that model can't be passed on in terms of public safety somewhere. It takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of trust, it takes a lot of dedication to get it done. But I think for all our communities, I think regionalization, and I think this is a model that could translate into something like that, and it needs to happen, I think, in the long run. So there's a framework there, why not use that to sort of start a dialogue in terms of, there's been a lot of talk between Du Bois Town and South Side. Everybody has their own territory, and provincial about, what they want to do, but, if you work hard enough at it, I think it can happen.
Thank you.
Shall we move ahead for now? I think we're going to have a lot of discussions in 2020.
Where am I? Oh, the next page, vehicle maintenance, and that For supervision and mechanics wages, the subtotal is $603,000, and supplies and materials, bus repairs, materials and supplies, uniforms, tires, and tubes, that subtotal is $434,000 for a grand total of $1,037,000 for vehicle maintenance.
Questions on page 5, Mrs. Katz?
You still turn in your tires, right? You
Lease our tires, yes, we do lease our tires, which eliminates, we have to do, with the federal government again, you have to do a study and a cost analysis of the cost of inventory and the cost of buying in terms of leasing cost. And so last time around that we did that, the federal government said that we should go with leasing. So that's what we do right now.
And bus repairs, because they're CNG buses, there's more difficult maintenance at this point?
Actually, I've been somewhat surprised in terms of so far. We have a very new fleet now, which obviously saves money like any kind of a new vehicle. You don't put as much in repairs, but the longevity and the technology is such that these type of buses come a long way. And as is with fuel, in terms of bus repairs, those costs are down over the years in terms of a trend, so that's great. But buses have gotten a lot more sophisticated too. Back when I started, buses didn't have air conditioning, power steering, didn't have anything. Their air conditioning was a hole in the floor. So things have come a long way from the stagecoach up to now.
When you first started.
Yeah, that's whenever.
I steered a car with no power steering.
Many other questions on that page?
Under the planning budget, again, there's a lot of different revenue sources that we're able to get with that particular budget, from the planning dollars that go through the county, $56,250, to a direct allocation from the federal government, $100,000, matching dollars, and then money that we transfer from the operating budget. The contract services line item is the amount of money now that we receive in best transfer managing their operation. Transfer from other sources is from our contingency line item, but also from the parking authority, reimbursements from STEP, as well as the county also supports our planning budget. And then the demonstration grant I show there, I don't necessarily have to show it there, but that's what we did last year, so I just want to be consistent to show that $353,912 for the next fiscal year, which balances down below the demonstration grant, so it's sort of a wash there. The total revenue is $1,563,362, and then on the expenditure side, the planning budget salaries, which are listed on the other page, related benefits, surveys and fees that we have to do on board the bus, and other types of surveys that are required. Planning expenses, special studies that we participate with the city, like the Park Avenue study and the marketing study related to East 3rd Street. They're winding down, so there's not as much budgeted there. Again, I mentioned the demonstration grants and the contract services. Line item on the expenditure side funds the shared ride call center costs, as well as money set aside that we picked up the Delaware Development contract. That was approved a year and a half ago. Because there was no source for that in the city budget, that was ongoing because of the East 3rd Street project, and we did get money from the foundation and the county to help with that. So again, the expenditures match the revenues of $1,563,362. So it's sort of a hodgepodge of different things. This is where our economic development activities usually take place, and whether we working with the college on East 3rd Street or working with the city on their various studies from Park Avenue to the East 3rd Street marketing analysis. So this is where we try to help out as much as we can in supporting the city and our efforts as well.
Ms. Mealy?
Oh, okay. Can you go over with me again what the planning expenses item refers to? I wasn't quite sure if you were dealing with that and special study at the same time, or,
The planning expenses there under that line item are all relate to the Unified Planning Work Program, which I think you're aware of. That's passed by the Watts Coordinating Committee and Technical
Yep.
Committee. It has about, for us, 8 different tasks, from data collection to
yeah, it looks like it costs a bunch
studies,
of
and
money.
that's where all those expenses fall to meet that. Again, it's called the Unified Planning Work Program, which is a document that not only contains all our planning efforts, but also the state and the county, and it's again, that's also the national transit data we have to report to the feds about all our activities every year. And so any kind of those related planning expenses as it relates to RVT and the UPWP is where that shows up. And
Got it. And then go over with me the split on contract services. You said it related to funding the call center, but also.
that's
some
down
contract with
under the
Delta?
250, that's where Delta and the call center falls.
Yeah. Okay, so, if you'll pardon me for not being aware, what are we paying Delta annually versus what are we getting for the call center? I assume that was related to BEST, and it is kind of related to BEST, but it's not. a
Well, it
direct
is,
in and out.
but it's, well, the call center part of it is.
Yeah.
And it's $140,589, and so I use, to help with the consulting service the city needs for East Third Street and Gateway. That's where I show the rest of it. So now their contract's coming up, so that's got to be a decision in terms of what we do with our consulting services and how
So we're looking at.
RBT participates in that, which I don't have. That's something that the new administration needs to take a look at and see what they want to do, because,
Got it.
all the consulting services contracts are up this year, at the end of the year.
Yeah, understood. Were it me, given the disparate uses we're putting that line to, I might prefer to see it be 2 lines.
That's fine.
But, so you're saying the call center's 149,000?
It's 140, 589, so,
Okay.
maybe
Yeah,
150 and 100, if that's how you want to show it.
Okay, that's what
I
I
guess I'm showing that there's 100,000 available for consulting services, however the administration wants to utilize that.
got it. And so that amount of money will remain, is also built into your 2020 budget?
Yeah.
Okay. Understood. All right, yeah, that was, it's like, those are some dramatically
Well,
different
it's,
things. And- But,
those, I mean, with those, that's one of the benefits of having expanded services. We're able to, the state approve a management fee, and we're allocate part of that back to the city, I guess.
got it.
Which is related because East Third Street was originally started with, our desire to, do that two-way traffic, and so we were able to build on that with the county,
And you'll get there someday, Bill.
I don't know about that.
No, I know. Hey, can I ask one other question related to the health insurance costs throughout RVT's budget? I notice under administration, you book like 1.35 million, but then against 300,000 in salaries, I'm assuming that's the healthcare for drivers and mechanics.
No, that 52 there, I mean, in the
Well,
planning
this-
budget.
Yeah, this health insurance
That
directly.
is, again, this is partial contract services, because the parking authority can't get their own health insurance. They go through the city to get their health insurance, and they reimburse us that amount.
Okay, so.
There's 2 employees that get health insurance
Through the-
from the
through the
parking
WPA.
authority. So because they don't have enough people to form their own group,
Okay.
and Benetcon said that they could come in under the city's plan, and so that's the budget for that, and then they reimburse us. That's in that transfer from other sources.
Yeah, got it. So that health insurance is not related to the salaries
No,
for the
those aren't, that
employees
isn't
and-
for any of our employees, for 2
Okay.
parking authority
So the
employees.
1.35 million then covers for healthcare under the administrative
all of it,
budget,
yeah, right.
covers all, aside from the Herdick Museum ones, right? It seems to me there's a healthcare line item,
That's,
Herdick Museum budget.
that's there, and I think that's for the person, that's for the event center personnel, Liz and
Okay.
Kayla.
Got it. Okay,
So those are the only 2 outside that other number.
got it. Okay. That's everything. Thank you, Bill.
Mr. Yoder?
Speaking of, back on the contract services, Delta, I know we have a couple of different economic development consultants.
Right.
And you had mentioned that I think both come up for contract renewal or however that gets handled in January. Could we get copies of that to understand the scope of their services, understand where some of the similarities, differences may be between consultants, so that way as we approach that in January, we can make not only an informed decision, but maybe a little bit of a better one as far as if, who, how many, et cetera.
Sort of a broad brush at that. Delta this past year was instrumental in going after multimodal funds, and the 10 different grants we got for East 3rd Street, that was their focus, as well as other federal and state transit dollars that they tried to seek, but they focused on the East 3rd Street Gateway project. As far as Penn Strategies, they focus on state grants, and they've come before council with a couple, I think a lot of different initiatives, and also they're focusing on the levy grants, which is not, I don't think, a specialty of Delta necessarily. So there is a good division of responsibilities, but you're right. If you look at their contracts, you'll see that, which, I can get, Janice can do that where we have them, which we'll provide to you. I can get them to you at the next meeting. But they're both, as I understand it, they're both up. Delta's was 1.5 years. The council approved that 1.5 years ago, and Penn Strategies, I think this was the second year of a 2-year contract. So, that's something that needs to be looked at, going into next year.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yeah, how many years have we been managing BEST?
BEST since 2011, late 2011.
Mr. Campana?
Thank you, Mr. President. We would be honored and we'd be very glad to share those documents with you. Also, in this proposed budget, we have dollars towards RFPs. So the objective is to put RFPs out for those services to give other people an opportunity to engage in the process. That's not a criticism towards Delta or Penn Strategies, but we think it would be much cleaner process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just as a point to that, through the efforts of council, especially Councilwoman Mealy, that RFP process with insurance has saved the city over $250,000 in 2 years. So there is there's obviously a need to always review your major contract service to see what kind of savings are out there. And insurance is a classic case of where we've had great success with the new relationship in terms of our insurance carrier.
Yeah, that's been a very positive relationship, I think, so far. The money in the general fund budget for issuing requests for proposal, where precisely is that?
I'm sorry?
The mayor just referenced money in the general fund budget for issuing RFPs.
I forget where it's at. You have things like, one of the things we haven't done for a long time, actuarial services. Actuarial services,
Yeah.
looking at.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, I definitely think that it's a wise idea for us to reexamine a lot of our
Yeah, there's a
major
list.
contracts or lack of contracts for services.
Where's
Joe?
the money?
Yeah, but I was just wondering where this funding was specifically. Okay. And you probably outlined it, Joe, in the narrative, and I skipped it. I'm sorry, I just,
Page
33, under contract services. Okay. So that's the increase there of 15.
$25,000. Every other year, we have $10,000 for our OPEB liability calculation. This is an off year for that, so it'd be the full 25 available for contract services as needed.
Okay.
That's for the
And/or
RFP.
for RFP issuance, right, yeah, or for the costs associated with that. Got
Okay,
it.
we put out an RFP and then choose somebody. How are we going to pay them? Where's that money?
Well, actuarial services, we
Geez,
do
Randy,
pay
that's
them
some tough
now,
questions.
so it would be, looking at, whether or not, you go with an existing firm, or you're looking at someone that provides more services for less money. You know, there's a lot of opportunities there. Also, the city, you know, there's been an ongoing relationship with Larson Design Group as, you know, for certain engineering services. Remember, John Grady would come back, and this is work item number 12, you know, on a, you know, an open-ended contract, CM services. You know, there's a litany of things that we can look at to save dollars.
Well, I mean, but previously, we had $100,000 in a line item for that. Now we don't have it.
I'm not sure. You mean for the actual legal services necessary for an RFP process, or?
No, for the actual consultant. I mean, there's no sense
Oh, well.
putting
yeah, if
out
you know,
RFPs if we know.
In this budget, yeah, there was a line item for 100, that was cut back, and Delta was, I think, removed, and there was a net of 100,000 for this year's budget for consulting services. We upped the contingency money primarily, so there's an extra amount of money. There is $100,000 there for the new mayor to decide what he wants to do in terms of consulting services.
That was the end of the mayor's office.
We didn't want to put in consulting service, we put in contingency for him to make that decision in terms of
Mrs.
that effort.
In the past, you have put Delta under your belt budget.
Right.
Okay. And
Not
we-
always, the city used to fund part of that, but
and we put Penn Strategies under the
city
city's
budget, right.
So under these circumstances, if we do an RFP, we would be doing an RFP for consulting services for RVT and the city then.
Possibly. You may argue that, because we're right in the middle of, if you recall, Delta's administering, we have like 3 open RACB grants, and they're right in the middle of administrating those RACB grants, which is right in the middle. And also the Third Street project has 1 more year. I would probably advocate that we would extend their contract just 1 more year to finish up all these projects.
Yeah, the
Same
same
with
thing
Penn
with
Strategy, if that makes sense, but if,
Penn Strategies is in the middle of getting funding
well,
for the
yeah, I
levy.
mean, that's, again, that's administration to make that proposal, but I don't know what line item, Joe, that there's $100,000 potentially there for consulting services for the new mayor to make that decision. I forget what line. Is that in the mayor's budget or legislative contingency?
But as I understand also, Delta's contract is up, was up at the end of November. So therefore, are we still, how are we dealing with paying them if their contract is up in November?
Well, we would extend it until we decide,
So
yeah.
so
I
they
didn't want
would-
to do anything until I had an opportunity to talk to the new mayor about that.
So therefore, money would have to be transferred in order to be paying them.
Well, I
since
had
they're-
enough budget for the entire year,
Oh, okay,
and there's money there for next year if that's what we'd like to do, so.
so that would come under your
Contract services,
contract services on page 6.
correct.
Okay.
Should I go? No?
Oh,
Quick follow-up.
one more.
Back to page 6 with the contract services real quick. Has Best been paying the 250? Has it been consistently 250,000 since 2011? Or has that
No,
number fluctuated?
No, it just started a couple, 2 years ago? Last year. It was the second year.
So it started in 18, so 18 and 19.
Well, again, we go into fiscal year, so it's been 2 years? 18? Well, fiscal year 19 and 20, yes.
Other questions? We can move on.
Go on. Oh, I'm
We're
sorry.
ready.
Okay. Under Trade and Transit and the Peter Hurry Transportation Museum, there are several partnerships or leases that we have for lease rental income, which includes the Third Street Garage, Community Theater League Uptown, Midtown Plaza, the Michael Ross Event Center. Budget there is $210,000, admission fees for the museum and other donations or grants, interest income. a balancing number from RVT and program income for a total of $1,442,000. Program income is primarily coming from the Church Street Transportation Center, our two tenants there, which are Fullington and Susquehanna Trailways. And then under the expenditure side, the salaries of $325,000 related benefits, supplies and materials needed for all our facilities downtown, contingency. This is where our debt service shows, as well as any kind of expenses related to maintaining the museum, painting the rail car, what have you, for a total of $1,442,000.
Mr. Yoder.
A couple questions. The debt service. So we're at FI, or the actual estimated line item, $715,000. That's up $140,000 from what we spent last year. Is the debt service, is that just interest on outstanding bonds?
No,
or that's towards principal?
Things were changed. If you remember, we came back to redo the bonds to take advantage of lower interest rates.
Yeah.
And so again, we're structuring this on our fiscal year basis, and so those numbers reflect just what we're going to be due and paying for the next fiscal year of $725,000. That answers your question. But there was a lot, because the first year, the $600,000, there was the way that we had refunded the bonds. There was a period of time we didn't have to pay principal or whatever. So we had that one year we got savings, and so that reflects in that number.
Yeah. So.
And the city got savings too. There was almost, I think, about $900,000 worth of savings between RVT and the city.
Yeah. So I guess a more straightforward question would be, of that $715,000, how much of that is paying down the principal?
Oh, it's all principal.
It's all
and
principal.
interest. Oh, yeah.
How much principal is left?
Joe and I are working, or Joe's working on, to give you a summary of that. There's probably around $17 to $18 million, plus $500,000. That's been paid down substantially for a settlement of a lawsuit. But we can give you the exact numbers. We've been working on that. We can give that to you. And the amortization tables.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. A second question related to salaries. It's up $100,000 from last year. What's that increase attributed to?
It's the same, actually the same.
No, I'm referencing, I went back through last year's budget. We spent $100,000 more actually this year than in fiscal year 2018. So just curious what that increase in spend is from. I'm assuming it's a new hire or a couple new people.
Well, that's where that would be purchase of services, where would they have, you sure, that's our facility manager, our HVAC person, mechanical person, our information center person, the temps that we have, and security. Some of the securities in there, which are temps.
There's like five.
There's five. Well, there's temps. I don't know how. It could be a couple. I mean, they stay 2 months. It's a miracle. But I'll have to look at that. I thought that was the same amount. You may be right.
Yeah, and maybe I'm misinterpreting something from fiscal year 18, but I went through a lot of both RVT and the general fund.
Well, 18 was, you're saying 18 was 225.
Yeah, the year before this.
The year before, I'm sorry, the year before 19.
Yeah, so 2018.
I'll have to look at that. I can't give you an answer.
Mr. Henderson.
Just kind of tracking through things, we're transferring from RVT into this Peter Hurdick museum budget.
Well, it's primarily trading our buildings downtown. Church Street Transportation Center, Trade and Transit 1, 2, 3rd Street, whatever.
So is this budget, yeah, this is a separate budget now?
Yes.
Correct.
No,
So,
it's been separate since, well, from Trade and Transit,
right.
some time.
But we're taking from RBT, putting into this 650, and then we're paying our debt service out of this budget. My question is there a particular reason why we're paying our debt service from this entirely separate
Well,
budget?
because most of it's come from Trade and Transit and Church Street and, you know, those different construction activities.
What does that have to do with the Transportation Museum? That's my question.
Well, this is more or less our facility budget, you know, the different buildings we have.
So should it be named something different? Okay.
Well, it's
So
Trade and Transit Center.
All right, I
Yeah,
see.
that's pretty, I mean, that's.
Okay.
It's just, this is our facility building budget.
So it's all the buildings?
Right.
All right, I got you.
Right, yeah.
I missed that somehow.
Maybe that's probably misleading the way we put that title there, but no, that's just a
I
small.
think I understand now.
That's a small part of it. We just, again, this was supposed to represent all our facilities.
Right.
To separate out of our operating budget, because that's primarily operations. And
So we
this
don't-
was, you know, this is what the auditors structured for me to try to keep the different component units separate for auditing purposes and for state purposes and all the whatever, so.
Is there a reason why we don't pay it out of our operating budget? And we're paying out of our facilities budget, all the debt service?
Because that was for capital investments, not operating investments.
Okay.
You know, this is like our capital, these are all capital projects.
Right.
And the operating budget is operations.
Yeah.
And so these budgets, side budgets are meant to balance, you know, and also keep separate the, like, lease rental income and, you know, so I just, you know, going with GASB and all the different accounting requirements and state and federal, which the auditors have to follow, and so this is what was developed out of that with their help, so.
I can see that. I
I
just
know
had
it's-
trouble.
it's,
I just had difficulty following it. I think I've grasped it now. But it's just curious. It's just interesting to see, to transfer into an entirely different budget.
Well, it's the same way with.
And then bring it back out again,
Well, that's
just
the way
to pay our
this-
debt service.
The way the city, you know, has their, on the equity page, where transfers into debt service budget and those different things, so.
Well, I
this was
understand
sort
that.
of
But this isn't a debt service budget. And I know, I mean, we're not going to have
you
necessarily.
know,
It's just curious. I mean, unless you're looking for it, you don't see it. But we're paying all of our debt through this fund here.
as far as RBT's part of it, yeah, which
Correct.
is, yeah, the city's,
Yeah, we have.
there's between 17 and 18 million. Half of it's RBT's in terms of all their construction. It relates to, well, as an add-on, we were able to help out with public services and all their different facilities, the C&G, Church Street, Trade and Transit, our primary ones. And then on the city side, you'll see, when you get that information, people forget, but Reach Road was $2 million of the debt. Purchase of our street lights was $1.5 million. So again, those go back some time, and, you know, those investments, for example, when the city purchased the lights, it saved a tremendous amount of money, instead of paying PPL, you know, for leasing the street lights. So, and with Reach Road, that was, and it's hard to remember all that, but Reach Road was a significant investment that had to be made. Reach Road, if you recall, that was in terrible shape, and so, you know, a lot of that debt goes back several years ago, 10 years ago, when there were some major infrastructure projects needed by the city. Even City Hall, the roof, yeah, there was, Joe was showing me, and we were looking at, it's in the audit as well, those lists of different things, but I thought it might be helpful for council to get an itemization of all the different, you know, how that debt was put into place. It was, what happened was there was a debt in place from 1976 when the city purchased this building, put in the pedestrian mall. and that was paid off in 20 years later. And at that point in time, when those dollars are freed up, that was reinvested, like I said, project like Reach Road, streets and parks. A street sweeper was part of that.
Right. Can you
so-
tell me where that's coming out of? I mean, I see where it's going into this fund. Where is it coming out of would it be the utility fund?
Yeah.
So where is that coming out and being
Which
transferred
part?
to that?
Which,
Well, I'm just looking for, okay, it's transferred from the
Right.
utility fund. Where does that show?
page 4, transfer, trade, and transit, 650.
Okay, I just missed it, that's all. Page 4?
Page 4, fifth line down.
Yep, I see it now. Okay, thank you.
I
Yeah, there it is. I just couldn't see it. I missed it, that's all.
well, it's just as hard for me to,
All right.
balancing all these different budgets and not, we tried to give you more information, so I understand.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
It's, I can't even read my notes. Should I go on?
One
I'm
more
sorry.
question, 2 more questions. Mr. Yoder?
Just to follow up, you had mentioned, in relation to the debt, the amount, amortization tables providing information. If you had mentioned this, and I missed it, my bad, but if you could also provide, what amounts of debt were related to what project, for just a quick, easy reference for me, for my learning purposes, that would be very,
That's not a problem.
Great.
Essentially, there's, when we restructured all the debt to take advantage of the interest rates through M&T Bank, there is the one bond obligation note for that. There's then the $500,000, which was the settlement of a suit. And then there's the recent renewal of a line of credit. We've had a line of credit that goes back 20 years. It was just renewed through C&N Bank, which was a much favorable interest rate. So there's only 3 debt obligations, but Joe has a background of how that was all consolidated, which projects. And anytime we came to council for a new bond ordinance, part of that was a listing of what project was for. And that had to be part of or the project had to be listed as part of that bond ordinance. So we can put that together for you.
thank you.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes, I had a couple of random questions. Real quick, where do the salaries under this budget reflect in the salary detail?
And part of it's in that tab. It's at the end there.
No, I mean, is it in the salary detail? The salaries for the...
Which one?
The salaries for the facilities?
The 325?
Yeah.
No, I don't have that itemized. I think it's just listed as 325. The total budget there, it's 288,470.
No, I'm speaking of the salary detail. The salaries listed in the facilities budget don't appear in the salary detail at the end.
The 325.
Yeah.
I don't have, that's not listed in there. I can give you a listing of it. I've done that before. I have no problem with that.
It doesn't, honestly, it doesn't really matter all that much. I was just kind of curious as to why it didn't show up, since that's a set.
No, I've always, just because it's, a lot of it was temps
Okay.
that, I really didn't itemize it. But
Right.
there are a couple full-time employees, so I can give you those salaries.
Okay, that might be helpful.
Because like in the museum, we only have a temp person that works there.
Got it.
In the information center, a lot of times it's a temp. And then there's Gary and there's Joanne, but they're full-time. I can give you those salaries.
And so then follow up, so we know in the general fund budget, on the comparative equity statement, page 1 of the general fund budget, the transfer to utility, the 210, obviously matches up to the match that RBT provides for the
Right,
state grants. The transfer to utility capital streetscape, the 150, what does that relate to again? You'll excuse me, but I can never remember.
That was debt service from years ago for streetscape.
Okay.
There was a $5 million streetscape.
And where does that show up then in your RBT budget?
That shows up, you mean where the money comes from? Oh, that's.
No, I mean, it's coming out of the general fund.
Other sort, that would be
$150,000.
in other, if you go to,
Sorry, Bill, it's just, as long as we're on this budget, we might as well ask the questions that are eventually going to
that
come from
would
the
be
general fund and drag us
under,
back there.
that would be under program income, the 545 is where that would show, in addition to, the other,
Program income on which page? I'm sorry, Bill.
sorry.
Program
Page 7,
income.
program income.
Page 7, okay, so the 545 program
Yes.
income is also showing
That goes in there?
150 from the
Right.
city. So technically speaking, that entire 650 is not actually for debt service transferred from WBT then.
Right.
But I guess part of what I wanted to mention, and I don't honestly know how this plays out, but the city's undertaken a number of projects that incurred debt at various times, some of them in field work. It seems to me the Church Street deck might have been one of them, as well as possibly some elements of trade and transit too. I can't recall, but in my 10 years on council, I have heard a handful of times that the income from the rental fees or something like that involved with the project that we're doing work on will cover the debt service associated with
Well, that's
the
where
debt that we're taking on.
CNG income as well comes in there. There was, I can tell you what our debt,
Right,
it was $1 million for CNG facility, and then there's money that comes in from the fueling station. There was $1 million for Church Street, which, all the rental income that comes in from there. There was $1 million for the garage and office facility, and then the balance was for trade and transit too, as well as public services.
You mean
which were-
you mean our debt?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's.
Sorry, no, what I was, I mean, I remember a significant number of the sources of the debt. Frankly, I may be just as curious as Adam to see it written, all lined out. But I guess what I'm saying is I don't know, and I'd be curious to hear at some point in the budget, may not be the time for us to discuss this, whether it's happened, but the concept has been over the years when we've taken on new debt as a city that that it will be balanced out by income coming from some quarter
Right.
associated with the new debt. And I don't know the extent to which it's happening and the extent to which it's not. Obviously, we all know that streetscape debt is not going to be reimbursed by rental income, for better or for worse.
Right.
But debt that we've taken on specific to Church Street, are we actually, is the debt service actually being covered by the rentals we're receiving?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Because if I'm looking at a $545,000
There
line
is-
item and you're telling me 150 of it's coming from the city, then I'm just trying to understand the breakout of other program income elements that mean that Church Street's paying for itself.
Was there quite, I didn't catch that, I'm sorry.
Our total debt for Church Street, you said, was how much, $1 million?
About $1 million, yeah.
Okay, and.
But we use far in excess of the revenue from Church Street to cover our debt.
Okay. I'm just trying to, if we're paying $725,000 in debt service out of this budget, it's a conversation for another time specifically related to debt service. I don't think that we need to mull over this with the budget discussions, but I pointed out for the utility of the new council people as well as the old ones us old ones, that looking a little bit at how our income is meshing with our debt service payments and whether or not those things are meeting up in the ways that they're supposed to is something worth considering later.
Well, keep in mind the Trade and Transit Center was,
I know that debt's special.
part of that was, we're out of our 8, whatever it is, probably $3 million of it is, let's see, for
And developers grant.
something else.
Yeah.
So, and that's one of the benefits, I think, of RVT is we've picked up debt service for $1 million of public service improvements, an arena, I mean, a lot of different things that are not.
No, I'm not, I'm not saying that RVT has not done its share. I'm merely saying that when we discuss future debt, as I know we will sometime, Mr. Nichols, we also need to look
I mean,
back at old debt and see exactly
Bottom
how
line,
we're
Church
covering it.
Street is able to pay a lot of debt that is not specifically related to RVT, but it's still program income, which we, you know, can be returned to the city in the form of debt service, which is,
Right.
that's what we do.
That's great. It's much better than not. How about that?
So as far as we, you know, as much as we can, again, leverage that income, we do. So, and that's benefit, like I said, public services, downtown development, a lot of different things. So the more program income we can generate somehow, then we're able to, like I said, return that in the form of investing in downtown projects or whatever. And that's the goal, at least my goal anyway.
Okay. That was all the questions I had.
Others?
Should I keep going?
Let's move on.
Want me to keep going? There's one more page, capital.
Do you need a break?
How long did it take?
Yeah, if anybody, I mean, yeah, there's a lot going on here.
Yeah.
And so we tried to do it in a way this year, so
Well, and
it's all figures that,
we appreciate that, Mr. Nichols.
and I know it's,
And I think this is just a prelude to further conversations that we'll
yeah, and
have.
that'd be great, because
in
it's,
2020.
like I said, what we wanted to do is, as Joe, well, and we did with the entire budget, is tie it
Yeah.
into audited figures, to approved grants, to
Right.
anything to make sure, because, you know, there's a lot of, you know, transfers here and there, and especially taking on additional grants, it's made it more difficult, obviously. But, you know, again, I think the way we structured it, it's better than it's been, so.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
the other one was capital projects.
Page 8.
And that's, yeah, and that ties into the tab in our binder that we provided everybody, and that just shows you, this is just a list of proposed projects that we presented to federal and state government. They've not been approved, but there's a list in there in one of the tabs that gives you a full description of the different capital projects, and you know, and just how they would be funded. And the breakdown on page 8 shows you what the federal share would be, the state share, and any local match that's required. And again, potentially could be $7,244,000. Again, these are multi-year grants, so not necessarily can be approved, you know, in the first part of next year. It just depends on when funding sources become available. But these were part of the projects we programmed on through the watch process and are eligible. And you show in FY19 the 3rd Street project that we were able to get a number of grants for, and that just shows you the numbers that were part of the Old City project, which is about a $25 million project, which included what the college did. That includes their building as well. So this was that was a total picture of that, because $12 million was counted as match for some of these grants from the college in terms of what their building cost. And that's the last page.
Any questions on page 8? Ms. Mealy?
One little one, I swear to God. The Old City Gateway match grants, et cetera, we're booking all of that in 19, even though most of the work's going to happen in 20, or a good chunk of the work?
Yeah, 3rd Street, yes.
Okay.
The Franklin Basin Street part of the project is pretty much complete.
It looks great,
Next
by
year
the
is the
way.
3rd Street part of the project from State Street to Basin.
Right.
And that'll be undertaken, those contracts have already been let. They're ready to go, you know, as
And we
soon
have a
as
chunk of 4th Street happening
weather
too,
breaks.
right?
What's that?
We have a chunk of 4th Street happening as well next year sometime, right?
That hasn't been bid yet.
And Willow Street?
That has not been bid yet.
Yeah,
We're still
right,
under
right.
design for those.
Okay. I guess the reason I'm asking that is we don't get into trouble booking all of that financial activity in 2019 when some of it's clearly happening in 2020 and 2021.
Well, because it's a multi-year project, that's how we
Okay,
typically do
that's-
it. We
that's
don't
fine.
rebudget it again. We're sort of, you know, the East 4th Street project, the Willow Street project, We're working on the Riverwalk connection part of the project. I think the new administration needs to take a look at those projects to make sure that they are, okay with the direction that they're headed. So we really haven't finished any kind of design yet until we get into next year.
Got it. I think that's a solid idea. I was just asking about the fiscal issue of whether or not we report all the expenditures in one year when they're actually ongoing.
Yeah,
But if
typically
that's-
what we,
if that's
in
how
our
we do it,
budget,
that's fine, right.
yeah, typically what we do in our budget is, it's budget 1 year, and then you show the activity, and it's, as long as it's ongoing, then, and all part of this project was approved, so if it wasn't approved, then we'd probably rebudget it again. And this comes out of our 6-year capital program as well, and through the Watts process, so there's a lot of, things that, there's like 6 steps in a capital project that we get involved in, and so in terms of programming it, and so since that project's alive and well, we're not going to rebudget it.
Got it. Great.
Other questions? Thank you, Mr. Nichols. I think we're-
Can I go home?
Eventually, yeah.
I don't think I'm.
We are
Next
moving
is
on
income
to,
estimates.
job well done, sir, income estimates.
As far as income estimates, I just want to show a couple slides here. If you were here, the Finance Committee reviewed the audit from the last calendar year, and wanted to show you a couple of these slides. You didn't have a chance to see them, but they're really fundamental to the city's annual budget process. Through the budget process, we try to present a budget that's realistic in terms of revenues and expenses, obviously. We want to meet revenue projections and budget in a way that there is an upside potential of up to 3%, sort of what I call the 3% rule, and expenditures as well that meets the needs of the city, and during the budget year, pursue opportunities that come in under budget by, up to 3%. For budget year 2018, you'll see the revenues were up 2.1%. The economy is doing better, so there was a dividend there. And expenditures were 6.5% under budget, and that was mainly through Public Safety Department with, a lot of the ideas that were in the financial plan, in terms of the complement of officers in the police department, other things, there were some savings there that, were maybe too deep in terms of that particular budget and are being addressed in next year's budget. So, anyway, with that, we always try to achieve an ending balance, once everything is said and done in a particular year, about $2 million. So I think the one slide shows that we've been able over the last 4 or 5 years, at the end of the day, come in around $2 million in terms of unassigned ending balance on the equity sheet, including possibly some restricted funding for projects. So again, this budget is a little tighter than usual, but it's, again, we feel that it's such that, has a lot of potential. A lot of the things that were put into the thought process are in the description, various descriptions in the budget. So, it's, with any budget, it's, you don't want to present anything that you're not able to live up to in terms of revenues or expenditures. So we certainly hope that that's, what we're proposing for next year, and looking for, any input that the new administration is desirous to change. So with that, I'll start with the income estimates, which are on page 8 of your general fund budget. And then one of the things with the income estimates, starting on page 8, first line item is real estate current. You'll see a budget there of $13,415,549. The amount is determined by the calculation on the first page in the miscellaneous section of your budget book. If you look at that particular page, it shows that the market value of Williamsport taxable real estate is $947,777,521, which is down again from the previous year. Because appeals or what have you, we have not had a reassessment for some time, so that does certainly hurt the bottom line when you have your total taxable real estate decline. So the assessed value ratio remains the same at 100%, therefore applying the proposed real estate tax rate, which is not showing an increase of 15.47 mils, generates real estate tax revenue of $14,662,118. And then you have to get to the budgeted amount, which we subtracted estimated alert abatements of $80,000 and applied a collection rate of 92%, which is pretty much right on every year. And then that gives you a budget number of the $13,415,549, which is the first line of the income estimates page. So added to that, we have real estate prior of $900,000, wage tax $2,100,000, local services tax of $1,050,000, and again, I should add that in your miscellaneous section of your binder is a 5-year budget comparison, 5-year averages as relate to certain line items, including the comparative equity sheet. So that gives you that Joe does a great job in determining trend analysis and looking at what's realistic in terms of the income estimates. Mechanical devices, $30,000. Business privilege mercantile tax, $2,075,000. Prior, zero. $310,000. Real estate transfer, interest and penalties, $270,000. Discounts allowed, for early payment of taxes, the same amount, $270,000. And tax anticipation note proceeds, $2 million, and that's essentially a wash because we show that as not only an income but also a transfer on the equity sheet. So we just need to account for it somewhere, and this is where we show it for a total of $21,880,549. License and permits, the TV cable franchise, $220,000. Other license permits, $100,000. Building permits, $350,000. And then street excavation permits, $100,000 for a total of $770,000. Then we get into fines and forfeits. Traffic fines state, $15,000. Traffic fines and restitutions, $42,000. Traffic fines local, $3,000. Magistrate fees, $95,000, for $155,000. Now keep in mind, on pages 4 through 7 are descriptions and definitions of the various line items that make up the 2020 income estimates and how the 2020 proposed amount was determined. So that's something new we added, hopefully is helpful in terms of all those different numbers, whether it be from a trend analysis or from updated information, what have you. We try to come up, propose solid numbers that certainly can be met for the upcoming year. Moving on to the next page, we have interest received, $145,000. And you can see that's substantially higher than what was proposed. And thank you to the treasurer for helping us achieve that. And tax investment income, $12,000 for a total of $157,000. Indirect cost allocation, sort of a return to the city of $75,000. Recreation, you'll note again, there's nothing from community development for the foreseeable future. Recreation program income, $20,000. Recreation sponsorships, that was one of our, in the investment report that we did, or we had thought that would be an area to achieve some additional income by doing sponsorships, and RVT working with recreation to that because of transitions in that particular department that wasn't achieved. So we really didn't budget that for next year, but that's certainly a possibility with the new administration. Pool admissions, $30,000. Concessions, $1,000. Rescue operations fee, we entered in that contract with a private concern to help us with that. It sort of got off to a slow start, but we're still hoping that improves. Towing fees, $16,000. Rental inspections, $40,000. As we explained in the detail, including your budget, is that rental inspection did not meet its forecast or what we budgeted because there was a lot of properties that were not occupied, and if they're not occupied, they're not subject to a rental inspection. So we're hoping that increases for next year. Special events, $30,000. And then you have miscellaneous income from all the different departments, from workers' comp, codes, controller, finance, fire, police, streets and parks, and treasurer. Significance are from finance. That's where the money that we get from the water authority, sanitary authority of $80,000 through the previous arrangement we've had for them for a long time in reimbursement for costs associated with a couple of pump stations. Then you have surplus property sales, $5,000, Bowman Field naming rights, $35,000. Benetcon health insurance surplus, again, there's a description of, the various amounts that we received over the years. Some have been pretty healthy, others have not, and this is our best projection on a meeting we had with Benetcon not too long ago. And then health insurance employee contributions, $25,000 for a total of $793,100. And then moving on to 10, the Grant State beverage license tax, including fines, $16,000, public utility tax, $19,000, pension contribution. This comes from Act 205 from the state, $1,250,000. In lieu of taxes, $300,000, and you have a sheet on in lieu of taxes of where we have received in lieu of taxes in the past year and where we forecast in the year coming up. Administration Tax Collection Office. This is revenue that we get from taxes for the school district. The SRO grant, the officer in the school, high school, $77,000 from the school district. County liquid fuels allocation, $24,043 for a total of $432,543. Total income general fund is projected and budgeted at $25,473,192.
Okay, you can take a breath now. And any questions from council members? The income projections.
I just had one quick question, which actually was more of a housekeeping thing, but why? So we have departmental earnings, which is where we book the contribution from the Williamsport Bureau of Transportation to the city, right?
Yes.
And the potential contribution from community development, and which Stephanie Young, of course, is not making, as you pointed out. But why do we also have line items under other contributions for those two things? And it does appear that community development is making a $20,000 contribution under the other contributions line?
Not for this year.
Oh, no, yeah, not for this year. Excuse me, Bill, sorry. But
That was for codes.
yeah, codes and clean and
So I
seal
guess-
stuff, and, yeah.
I guess it was eliminated. I'm sorry.
But I guess what I'm asking is why do we have?
Maybe
two
Joe, maybe you need to clear, I don't know, maybe I'm missing something.
Elimination was a zone, or zones that were set by the planning commission back in the 90s. I think it was, according to Stephanie. Because it's been so long and they've done what they could to improve those neighborhoods. In order to get that reinstated, we'd have to create new neighborhoods, or there'd have to be a new designation to bring that funding back. It's been the goal to phase that out over time, and we're finally at the point that they need to phase it out.
Got it. So it is something she would like to phase back in another neighborhood, or it's something that she doesn't want us to work with?
It is something she could. I don't know what the process exactly would be to go through that, to get that reinstated. It was a lot higher years ago, I think 100 plus. But again, we've been slowly phasing it out till we were at the 20,000 mark last year. So that might be a discussion or something to add to the finance agenda to discuss the potential.
She'll be with us like all day tomorrow, won't she? I think she's in for, maybe not, maybe I'm misremembering on my finance agenda. But my secondary question, Joe, is simply why we have two different places where we could potentially have contributions from community development and River Valley Transit. Would a transfer be slightly different from a departmental earning?
The departmental earnings is for allocations for space services. The transfers are for specific items,
Okay, got it.
i.e. the blight elimination.
Okay, so they are slightly different categories.
Correct.
Understood. That's all, thank you.
Other questions on the income? All right, Mr. Mackey.
So on page 4 here, it says a $100 tax is paid for each amusement device, including skill games, and we're showing $30,000. Is that telling me that there's 300 amusement devices operating in the city of Williamsport? And how many of those are skill games?
Well, I know where there's probably 400.
How many of those?
I think that's an income opportunity.
Yes.
Because $100 does not seem like a lot of money when we're talking
No,
about a skill game.
they're for any mechanical device, whether it be a jukebox or a pool table, that you pay to play, a trivia machine, whatever, there's $100 associated with that. And there's been attempts to modify the amusement ordinance because the Community Arts Center only pays $100 for its season, which, seems to be a little, out of whack, but you're right, I presume there's more than 300 machines of some sort in our community.
I guess my question is, who came up with $100? Where did that number come from?
That's in the ordinance from ages ago. I'm not sure how that
I think
was.
it's 1948, Mr. Nichols. I'm not
40.
quite sure. No,
Yeah.
I'm serious, I really think.
Okay, well, I mean,
It hasn't been revised.
when we're talking specifically about skill games, one of those machines has the potential to generate $15,000 in a year. So, I mean, does a $100 tax on that seem?
That's what should be, on any kind of machine like that.
So should we be relooking at this tax is my question.
There is, in the ordinance, there does call for enforcement of that through somehow, I forget how it lists, but because of the plethora of these machines all of a sudden, I think that should be a priority of,
All right.
the finance or controller, treasurer, however we want to work that through, because I just think that there's got to be more than 300 of those machines, I think, but.
Well, even if there's only 300,
Yeah.
$100 a machine, and especially when we're talking about these skill games is.
But
It's, yeah.
the law says $100 per active machine, so, I'm guessing, without you saying it, that there's an opportunity there.
Okay, yeah, I know that, this is not the time to talk about it, but
Yeah.
changing that law.
Other questions?
I also think it would be a good idea with revenue-wise for us to look at nonprofits that pay nothing. They use our police, they use the fire, we clean the streets, we do all those kinds of things. Even if there was $100 or $200 or $500 given by nonprofits and people that don't pay those taxes, I think there's one church that pays something in the city for the police and fire, but I think it would be something that we could ask for. It should be a request. It can't be something that you're expected to do, but I think a kind request would be very appropriate for a revenue income.
Good point. Mr. Henderson?
Just to follow up on that, in our Public Safety Committee, we have in the past discussed the possibility of like a public safety fee or something similar to that. It's certainly possible. Other communities have done it, and it's something that we can look into.
Mr. Nichols, could you go back to the first, where the 2.1% and 6.5% were? The first frame where the 2.1% increase
The
in
slide.
revenue slide, and the 6.5%. Yeah, thank you. And you've expressed that this year's budget is, you cut it very tight. there wasn't a 3% leeway either way. I think, personally, I need to keep those two numbers in front of me as we go through the rest of the budget, because we've been presented with a no tax increase budget, and we need to look at everything in light of, we came out of a fortunate year, and I can just tell you, things have changed, and we know they've changed internally, and some of those things up there aren't going to happen. And we can't take that as an assumption going forward throughout the rest of this budget that's going to happen this year. Ms. Mealy?
Well, and it bears mentioning, sometimes I think that general fund, the initial comparative equity statement can be a little confusing, especially maybe to new members of council, but the total available includes any general fund balance we have. So if you look at the 2020 budget, we're booking a total available of 28 million, but we're only actually making $25.4 million, and yet we're spending 27.9. What that means is if we don't have revenues that are 2.1% over budget and expenditures that are 6.5% under budget, if we are dead on in our calculations this year instead, then we are deficit spending by $2.5 million in 2020, unless we make some amendments to the budget and/or book a tax increase that allows us to have a little bit more padding when the end of the year comes. We're basically taking a $2.6 million budget, excuse me, I'm having a brain fart here, what's the term for it?
Fund balance.
Fund balance, thank you. Yeah, that we carry over down to $163,000 fund balance. And for those of us who've been on council for a while, we've gotten used to that because the helpful finance department, generally speaking, has padded the budget just enough that we turn up a couple $1 million every time there's an audit, which is wonderful. But at some point, of course, there won't be that much padding, and when there's not that much padding, the number really is going to look something like $163,000. And as the person who, as one of the people on the finance committee who receives the audit report every year, I can tell you that our audit will not be as rosy if our general fund balance come the end of 2020 or come the end of 2019 turns out somehow or another to be $163,000. Or, you know, if the year when we haven't hidden enough money from ourselves to have a $2 million general fund balance, they recommend I believe it's, what is it, Bill, 15 to 30 days spending? They want you to have a safe number is maybe a 15-day.
Well, it's between 5 and 15% of your budget, or so many days. But if you look at the simple, I mean, you know, I like to think things in simple terms, in terms of the global view of this, and that's, in the financial plan we called for, we should have at least a $500,000 ending balance. If you take the 3% rule, 3% on revenues is $750,000, and 3% savings on expenditures, $750,000. You add in the $500,000 ending balance, you got $2 million. You know, and that's how we try to look at it.
Right.
And typically we've been pretty successful in looking at those terms, but if you have a tight budget, then it makes it that much more difficult going forward, obviously. But
I guess that's my point, is that it is, there are a number of different approaches to budgeting, one of which is to build in a little bit of leeway both on the expenditures and the revenue side, one of which is to budget very tightly. But we should bear in mind that had we budgeted tightly over the last couple of years, we would have generally been $2 million in deficit spending every year that I sat on this council. And so if that were to actually happen with this year's budget, if you'll pardon my French, we'd be screwed. So we, you know, it is something to consider. Randy's right. Bear those numbers in mind and try to make certain that we are padding as well as we have been in the past. Right.
No other questions on income estimates then? Thank you, Mr. Nichols.
I think I'm locked in place. I don't know.
Make sure you can move.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're a little bit behind our times here, but we'll move to general government, and that's the mayor's office, page 19. Good evening, Mayor.
Good
King.
evening, Mr. President, Madam Vice President, members of City Council, and incoming council members. Mayor's office, and we'd like to start off with the first line item, salaries, $108,322. And I would be remiss if I did not make a comment on this line item. First of all, in a spirit of cooperation, I appreciate the mayor-elect in participating in this budget to a certain extent. He did make a request in regards to a salary detail that affects the mayor's administrative assistant or executive secretary. Now that, just to give you a little bit of history on that, we have two individuals that work part-time. One individual works 4 days a week, the other one works 1 day a week, and the purpose of doing that is to try to save some dollars, because in the last 5 years, we have not had to pay health care, so we have been able to save some dollars. I just want to touch upon this briefly. I respect the position because I've worked with an administrative assistant for 12 years. They have a lot of responsibility, but I disagree with the amount of increase that has been recommended in that position. If you take a look at that position in 2019, it cost the taxpayers $27,861, whereas the request is $35,327 in 2020. That's a 22% increase, or $7,466. I'm not criticizing the value of that position, but the intended increase of salary just doesn't make sense to me. I don't think it's consistent with the other raises. Also, I think it's going to cause some difficulty with the other employees. But please think about that. Ultimately, it's council's decision. FICA, $8,300. Life insurance, $675. Workman's comp, $50. Pensions, $43,768. Health insurance, $26,500. That's the existing health insurance that would cost just for the mayor. If you're looking to make that position one individual instead of two part-time, you're going to have to make changes to that number, but ultimately it's council's decision.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
When you took office, did you not have one full-time person in that position that did take health care benefits?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
But to
Thank
save
you.
dollars, that's why I made the changes. So it's ultimately council's decision. Total personnel services, $187,615. Hearings and litigation, $50,000. Office rent, $33,400. Total of $83,400. Other expenditures, SPCA, $28,000. Historical Society, $1,000. A contingency for police only, $20,000. Citizens Corps, $1,000. Newberry Partnership, $2,000. Victorian Christmas, $1,000. For that section, $53,000. Supplies and materials, general office supplies, $3,500. Support equipment, $1,500. Total supplies and materials, $5,000. Total department expense is $329,015. For the 2019 budget proposal was $341,666. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
When you have general office supplies and support equipment, would that include, well, let me ask first of all, the computer that sits on your desk, how long has it been there?
Many years.
Many years?
Many,
Okay.
many
So
years.
does any of this budget include any upgrades in technology for a new administration? Okay, thank you.
The lease of the copy machine, the lease is up, so is money there unless the copy machine needs to be replaced. So there's $1,500 for support equipment. How that's utilized, be it computers or copy machines, whatever, there's a bucket of money to work within.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, Mr. Yoder, I'm sorry.
So this is a pretty obvious trend. If you go through not just the mayor's office, but every department through the budget, it's been a trend for the past couple of years, and I know that this council has mentioned it previously, is the increasing costs of pension and health care. The trend goes anywhere from spend of, I'd say, 7.5% to 20% in departments year over year. And as we talk about deficit spending, as we talk about budgeting, as we talk about cost management, that's where it's all at. So it's not really an ask, or well, it is an ask. It's not really a question, but just a comment. I'm hopeful that a new council, a new administration, we can work together to address that in a way that takes care of our employees, our public servants, but helps ease some of the financial tension that looks to me that we're, so just a general comment.
I think that's pretty much to the point. And I think we have every intention of doing that. So, all on board. Any other questions? I have a couple questions, Mayor, about the budget in general. Mrs. Fosnot and I were able to sit down with Finance and go over the original draft budget. And that did have a slight tax increase in it. But you had your opportunity to make some changes. Could you just briefly address what you changed in the budget and your rationale for those changes? Because those changes are what we're going to have to deal with, and I think we need to know.
Well, my philosophy has been for every year just to take a look at each line item by line item. And to keep and try to prevent a tax increase as it is. You look at all the other municipalities, they're not raising taxes. You take a look at the city, we're different, especially because we are a city. We provide different services. Especially you take a look at the police and fire, and that's 16 million right there. So my objective all along was to try to cut as much as possible and prevent a tax increase. And that's what we've done.
Okay, and that's that's to the general question of philosophy of the budget. I'm not particularly asking that. I'm asking for rationales for each of the individual changes you made, regardless.
If you want to go over each change, we can.
Yeah,
we
could
talk
we
about
do that?
Sure.
Pardon me?
If you want to bring up the specific change, I'd be glad to give you my rationale.
Okay. You addressed the one, you cut the health care out for,
Because that's what we've been doing the last 7 years, so I figured this is a lean and mean budget.
okay.
We've done that, our office has been very effective, and my thinking was that the incoming mayor could do the same.
Okay, so I believe that was 26,500, that change?
Yes.
Okay, so
And the,
I just want these to be out front there, because we're going to have to deal with a budget that takes into account what the new administration wants, and
correct.
we can't make up money out of thin air January 1st. We have to have things set. So just so people, I want the public to understand that
And
a no tax increase budget is an admirable goal, you know, and I think we all seek that. But at the same time, then, we need to deal with the realities of some of the things we're seeing, like tonight, the estimates from before that turned out real good, some things that are trending down that we need to take into account. And now some of these things, like if the new mayor wants a full-time person with health care benefits, which, like I said, you had when you first came in.
I don't think we can afford it anymore, but all I want to say is, listen, I want to work with council, okay? This
Right.
is the last one. The mayor does have the opportunity, like I did
Yes.
when I was mayor, to reopen the budget and take a look and see what he feels comfortable with and what he
Yeah.
wants to live with. He has that opportunity as well.
He does. I just wanted to have these kind of settled before we get into further discussions, so we know what was changed and what effect it had. And one of the things was the 14,000 in the city council equipment budget was taken out, and that was for technology. And, I mean, if we're going to be a competitive city moving forward, we have to understand that we're not isolated in this valley. We're competing against other communities across the state and across the whole region. So there's certain things that are essential realities in this day and age to be able to function, to be able to interact, to get information and share information. And the main vehicle for doing that now is technology. And I think one of council's initiatives in doing that was also to reduce reams of this passed out to us that we have to store when we can have it on a device. So, you know, so that was a $14,000 savings. And you opted to, for the police to lease their new vehicles rather than buy. And I understand that. That's 6 of one, half a dozen of another in some ways. So that was a $30,000 savings. But the consultant, 130, yeah. That wasn't the savings, that was the,
That was 190 originally. The savings was-
right, yeah,
Okay,
okay. What,
yeah.
the consultant, 100,000 that you took out. And then you said we could, the new mayor could have an RFP, but
I was under, and maybe I might be wrong, so I
Yeah.
apologize, but I was under the impression from statements
Yeah.
that the mayor-elect made about consultants, he wasn't completely sold on consultants.
okay.
Okay, so
No.
that's one of the reasons why I made those
Oh, I'm-
changes as well.
I'm not questioning you about that. What I'm saying is, that $100,000 that you took out of the consultant line, it was used to balance the budget for no tax increase. So what that means is that $100,000 isn't moved, it's gone. To balance the budget, it has to be cut out. It can't be moved somewhere else in the budget. So if he did an RFP and found a firm that he wanted to bring in and bring it to council, that $100,000 isn't there. So that's going to have to be found somehow.
Well, my understanding, if you look at the legislative contingency, you have more than you may need. So those dollars could be used towards.
Well, if the dollars were just moved, if $100,000 was just moved from the consultant line to another line, it would not reduce the budget to give a no tax increase budget. It would still be in the budget. So it doesn't matter where it would be moved. It would still be in the expense line. And this change to get to a no tax increase budget indicates that it's gone. That's my question.
Mr. Nichols, could you touch upon that?
Which line?
Previous page. Previous page. Go to your previous page, 26.
No, I think what we were talking about is the money that's in legislative contingency.
So then,
There could be money there that could be allocated at the desire of the mayor and approved by council for consulting type services. Again, that money is also there for other consulting type fees, for legal services. We have, bargaining contracts, other, litigation, what have you, or, again, that's.
I'm not arguing that. I'm arguing, how could the $100,000 taken from the consultant's line be used to reduce the budget so there's no tax increase and still be in the budget?
No, under legislative contingency for this year under city council was $110,000 that was used. There's a budget of $175,000 in that line item for next year. So while it's not $100,000 more, there is additional money placed there. Now, again, there could be some other expenses that might need to come out of there, such as legal services for, you have a major bargaining unit agreement that's coming up next year, those type of things. So, the mayor needs to, the new mayor needs to look at that and decide his priorities, with council in terms of things like consulting fees, or, we can look at other parts of the budget to see what's available, again, in terms of his priorities. So, Joe and I, would look at that and see what we could recommend if that's, his priority in terms of consulting fees.
That would be fine.
You could, may I?
Sure.
Okay.
I guess.
You could take a look at that, start with the salary in regards to the secretary from 27, 35,000. You could reduce that to like a 2.5% increase and you'll have some extra dollars. It's at least something, but I just want to put that out.
Okay, I guess then, I don't know how we went from a tax increase to no increase and left $100,000 of that savings cut to get to a no tax increase budget and left it in the budget, but.
You don't know because it's
I-
not possible, Randy.
I guess,
Right. And all the prevaricating in the world can't possibly make that change.
so I guess we'll find out as we go through. I hopefully, because I think it's. Yeah. Yeah, we can make the changes. I just think it's important that the public understand that there was a draft budget that had a small tax increase in it. And this was, $100,000 was used to get to that, to cut it down to nothing, but yet $100,000 is still there somewhere. So,
Okay. All right, thank you.
thank you, Mayor. So that brings us to Department of Streets and Parks. Mr. Winder, welcome.
Good evening, current members and future members of council.
Yes, sir. Page 22.
Page 22, Administration, Streets and Parks, Office of the Director. Salaries, FICA, life insurance, workers' compensation, pensions, health insurance, for a subtotal personnel services, $315,525. Purchase of services, training, travel, office rental, contracted services for a subtotal purchase of services, $29,700. Supplies and materials, general office supplies, support equipment, telephones, for a subtotal of $9,500, for a total department expense of $354,725.
Questions from council?
I have a question.
Mrs.
What
Fosler.
are the contracted services that we get?
Consultant fees, incidental expenditures, architectural and engineering costs. For example, during the 4th Street project in Newbury, it was determined that the run, the Fox Hollow Run that runs underneath the roadway there, needed some attention. In order to do the work to it, since it's under a PennDOT roadway, we had to have certified engineered drawings done. So therefore, we had to contract out to have the drawings done and stamped to meet PennDOT specs.
And that it's anticipated that that should be increased for the next year because we need those services in order to be able to do.
Unfortunately, this falls under the construction management, the engineering costs of different projects. So just looking at the future.
We've had that discussion about a construction management group to be on site when we're doing that. We talked about that in one of the finance committee meetings. That would come under this contracted services.
Depending on the project, yes, like Graphius Run could definitely fall under this.
Thank you.
Other questions on page 22? Okay. Mrs. Katz.
Yes, she's
Mr.
looking at
Pelisi, then. We'll work our way this way.
Again, I asked the question before. I see salaries of $166,623. How many salaries does that cover?
That includes one unionized employee, which was the office manager, at a 2.5% pay increase this year, the general manager, and the engineer.
3 positions.
Yes, 3 positions.
Just to tag on to that real quick, I also see a decrease in salaries, down to $166,623 for the proposed 2020 budget.
That was due to the previous office manager. At her retirement, with her longevity and years of service, her pay scale was a lot higher than the new office manager that only has 10 years in, I think, roughly.
Thank you.
Mrs. Katz? Oh, okay. Ms. Mealy?
That was actually basically all that it was related to. I was wondering about, because we rarely see this, the increase in salary, but that was related to the changeover of your, right?
Unfortunately, we lost Debbie Grado.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but the salary increased, but it was related, I'm assuming, to some training time when you had both people on staff.
Any other questions on page 22? We're done with page 22.
Administration, Streets and Parks, Parks Department, Personnel Services, Salaries, Overtime, FICA, Life Insurance, Workers' Compensation, Pensions, Health Insurance, subtotal $601,043. Purchase of services, heat, tree removal, equipment rental, Brandon Park electric bills, Ways Garden electric bills, Bowman Field electric bills, Memorial Park electric bills, Young's Woods electric bills, water and sewer, Ways Garden Commission, Festival of Lights, subtotal purchase of services, $20,275.
Thank you. Questions? Mrs. Fosnot.
Bowman Field electrical bills. When someone uses Bowman Field other than the crosscutters, do they pay a fee for the electric if it's at nighttime?
They pay a fee for the amount of electricity they use, but when you initially turn on the field lights, for instance, that initial burst of energy is an enormous cost. And there's not a fair way to divide it up to, if there's only 3 people there playing games at Bowman Field pre-season to the crosscutters, it's very hard to break that cost down because the more you use the lights, it's funny to say, but the less the electric bill becomes overall. The initial charge up of those lights each month is what creates such a high cost.
And the groups that use that facility other than the crosscutters, I know the high school once in a while uses it, some of the colleges use it, and they're billed for that electric.
Yes, I can't speak on exactly what they're billed. I know that's through recreation and part of their agreement.
There's 4 or 5 different categories that they're billed for. They're billed for the field's usage per game, double headers, slightly more of a fee. They're also billed for if they use the field lights, and I think that there's an hourly rate for that. I'd have to confirm that with the rate sheet. They pay if they want to use the scoreboard or if they want to use the PA system. There's add-ons to the base fee for the use of the field.
Thanks.
Mrs. Katz.
To the city. We are going to have someone that's going to take care of time, which each game, the light usage, things like that. There's going to be more controls put into place at this point. We just haven't brought it to council yet. We're waiting for the final documentation that we've been working on.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Yoder.
If I missed this, my bad, but I noticed from last year's budget to this year's budget, the Shade Tree Commission was eliminated, where it's not showing up in here, unless I'm missing it somewhere else. Why was that? Okay, so we just took it out because there hasn't been funding. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. I figured as much, but I figured I would ask the question. Thanks.
Just to kind of help with your thought there, the Shade Tree Commission, through the Hazardous Tree Program, actually carries itself. So at this point, the city's not really putting any funding into that. Like I said, the Hazardous Tree Program's carrying itself. It's assisted in buying equipment. The forester's able to get chainsaws and different items like that through the Hazardous Tree Program. So it's, at this point, self-funded.
Ms. Mealy.
I would also point out, for what it's worth, though, that the city's total actual paid out of the general fund budget for new trees, flowers, and shrubs is $1,000. But we have been the recipients of a Tree Vitalize grant the last couple of years that helps us to increase that. But we don't put a lot of money into reforesting the city, if that was part of your question, Mr. Yoder. That is to say, I'm not certain the Shade Tree Commission itself needs any funds to put together its activities. But the city could always invest more in the green infrastructure. That is to say, the actual trees and shrubs that we have than we do currently. Okay.
Mr. Henderson.
Could you speak to the Ways Garden Commission? Just clarify that in Q3, and by the way, I want to thank you for putting in the figures for Q3. It was $2,496. the estimated will be back to 1,000. Can you just,
During the transition of Bob Esposito resigning as Ways Garden Commissioner and the rest of the commission trying to take over the financials, the city did cover costs to help finalize the pavilion project there. And now that the commission has essentially gotten control of their checkbook and other items there, they will be making a refund back to the city to cover all the costs that we had put out.
okay, thank you. Just to tag on to that, I think in our recent discussions, we discovered that the actual fund for the Ways Garden Commission by ordinance should be with the city. I think we've discovered that, or I could be mistaken, but do you remember that conversation?
I do. The city has oversight of the funds. I don't remember exactly how it'll
Okay.
all work out, but
Okay,
we are slowly moving into that transition. Currently, they have all of the Ways Garden Commission mail coming to our building, and we're slowly transitioning to that point.
okay. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that, because I know that we've talked about that before, and obviously this is not the place to make a decision like that, but I think in the future it'd be good if that was brought in-house so we could keep an eye on that. So, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Page 24 then.
Continuation of Parks Department, supplies and materials, gas and oil for vehicles, protective clothing, other parks materials, new trees, flowers and shrubs, Brandon Park tree maintenance, equipment for a subtotal of supplies and material, $85,700. Equipment repairs, vehicle repairs, repairs to other equipment for a subtotal of $15,000. Other expenditures, Bowman Field improvements for a subtotal of $70,000. Total department expense, $792,018.
Questions on page 24? Mrs. Fosna.
This is a little tiny thing, but I'm very concerned about the trees in Brandon Park. I mean, a lot of them have gone down, a lot of them are old. New trees, flowers, shrubs, Brandon Park tree maintenance, it's such a small budget there, $1,900 for that group, and I think it's much bigger than $1,900, and I don't know what your thoughts are, but I've not seen a lot of new plantings and a lot of trimming happening in Brandon Park. It's one of our nuggets. I mean, it's a beautiful park, and the city really has, in the past, taken care of it extremely well, and I don't see that happening right now, and I'm very concerned about that.
There's a multitude of things. One thing is, you know, with the hazardous tree program and trying to get trees cleaned up off the street in the right-of-way, very time-consuming. With the amount of work that Streets and Parks has undertaken to bring more work in-house is another thing to look at. Once we make it through the hazardous tree program, Chad Eckert, our forester, is going to evaluate Brandon Park, and we are going to dedicate some time there as well as to other parks, do some tree removal. We're getting to that point where the trees are hitting the age, you know, throughout the entire park or through multiple parks, that unfortunately the work's getting a little ahead of us. But it is definitely going to be taken care of through the winter and early spring. And I know we haven't received our official letter yet, but we did receive the the Tree Vitalize grant for 2020, and Chad did put some trees in Brandon Park with that grant as well. And I know he planted a couple this spring at Brandon Park through that program. We will be pushing the trees that you can plant in memory of a loved one or whatever have you. Again, this year, that's usually big ticket thing for Arbor Day. So
And maybe we
hopefully-
should do it more than just Arbor Day. Maybe it's something that we need to be advertising and doing a little bit more vigorously with volunteers and people being aware that they can buy a tree in Brandon Park, they can buy a bench, they can buy a shrub, and maybe we should be doing a little more aggressive work with that. Just a thought. I'm concerned about that.
I would agree.
Mr. Henderson?
Could you speak to the Bowman Field improvements? What exactly are we talking about there?
If you remember correctly, council approved the RACP grant, which requires a match, and under the 2019 budget, when we were at this point last year, we were to use Act 13 funds. I believe Mr. Pavlak found that we can't actually use Act 13 funds, so we had to use funds from another place, which we didn't spend them this year. And Joe, if I don't say this correctly, please jump in.
We're going to discuss this with the Act 13 budget. Last year during the budget process, we moved $50,000 in over a period of a couple years for matching the RACB funds.
Right.
RACB's come back, the state's come back and said because the Act 13 funds are through the state, that they're state funds and can't match the state RACB funds. So therefore, we've put it in the general fund budget and added the money into streets. So it's like an offset of the street money between the general fund and Act 13 to offset the Bowman Field money being shifted around.
Yeah, I do recall that, changing that, or taking that 50,000 from, 50,000. And so this is where it shows up in this budget here.
Yes.
That's for that RACB grant.
Yes.
What about the other 20,000? That's, I know we've talked about this in the past. Just refresh my memory as to why we're taking 20,000 out of our streets and parks for Bowman Field improvements.
Throughout the process of the improvements there, for instance, if an AC unit or a hot water heater or, 1 year we had fencing get blown over and we just didn't have the money in the facility maintenance account for those high dollar items. So that's why we leave 20,000 in a Bowman Field improvement account.
Okay. Because I remember a discussion last year, and we discovered there was a Bowman Field account. We didn't realize it, and there was, and of course, we're utilizing that for the RACB grant. I understand that. It just, if we have a fund like that, it would seem to be, though we can't use it now, it would seem to be that's what that fund would be for, rather than taking it out of our general fund every year. So just a consideration. 20,000 is a lot. For Bowman Field improvements. But I know it's a wonderful park, and we want to maintain that park. I'm not against the park. Of course, with recent news, there's a lot of big question marks that we all have about that. So I'm not sure. Just a thought there. I just wanted to hear your take on that. Thank you.
Ms. Mealy?
And just to be clear on the extra $50,000 in that line item and the RACP match, we have not made any particular movement thus far on expending those RACP dollars, correct? That is to say, to the best of my recollection, we haven't authorized any expenditure of any funds related to future Bowman Field improvements, and I just want to be clear that that is still the status of things, right?
You're talking about the RACB project, or?
I'm talking about the scoreboard, the other Bowman Field improvements that we spent some time discussing in 2019, but we never came up with a final agreement for any of them, to my recollection.
No, the sub-recipient agreement would be for the scoreboard with the cross gutters. That's where we were headed.
Okay.
We have that drafted up, ready to go, but with the, as you know, the discussion about the renewal of the minor league contract with MLB, we decided to put that on hold until we had
Okay.
clarity in terms of where that was going.
Okay.
So,
I just wanted to be clear, the fact that we have $50,000 in this line does not in any way indicate that we're necessarily spending it.
no, that's correct. We are,
Okay.
no, we would not be moving forward until we get that sub-recipient agreement in front of you and moving forward with that half of the project. So right now, we put that on hold until we get absolute clarity on what's going to happen. Now, we've been assured that that's just MLB's negotiating position or whatever, and it was not intended to be really, I guess, a public discussion at this point in time. The cross-gutters and the ownership say that, because of the, we're in an excellent position because our stadium is up to standards where many of the minor league stadiums are not, and I think that's where that's coming from. But just for, precautionary purposes, we feel that we should not be moving forward with that until we get absolute 100%, because part of that was an agreement to renew, they agreed to renew their lease, the cross-cutters, that is, for another 4 years. So, that's a big commitment that we want made before we move ahead on that part of the project. So that is on hold.
Good. Okay, just wanted to, make sure that as the administration and council were on the same page about that, because seeing the money set aside in the budget just made me think of it. So, okay.
Mr. Henderson.
Just one other, and that is the equipment line item. We're up from 37,000 to 54. Are we looking at some extra equipment there?
Yes, we're looking to replace a 1993 John Deere, trying to remember what size that machine is, a 5300 tractor. If you remember, 2019, we replaced one of the smaller mowers.
Yes.
So that was the $37,000. The $54,000 would be to replace the mower itself, or the full-size tractor itself, the front bucket, which is used during hazardous tree cleanup from stump grinding, snow removal, and it would replace the 3-gang mower on the back. So we would have a complete new machine ready to work to assist with mowing of 200 acres of grass, snow removal, and things of that nature.
Yeah. Good, thank you.
That machine gets worked pretty hard.
It definitely does. Don't get me wrong, the 1993 is still running pretty good, but I think before it starts nickel and diming us, we should try to definitely make a purchase.
Good. Other questions on page 24? Let's move on.
Streets and Parks, Streets Department Traffic Control, salaries, overtime, FICA, life insurance, workers' compensation, pensions, healthcare, subtotal personnel services, $1,947,292. Purchases of services, water and sewer, light and power, street lighting, heat, beltway lighting, trash removal, contract services, recycle program, for a total of $195,700.
Questions, page 25. Ms. Mealy.
I know a couple of years ago, we had seems to me it was Jeff Whelan, maybe from the county commissioners, in here to talk about changes to the county recycling program and ending some street pickup and various and sundry other things. Are we looking at any changes coming up in future that we're aware of that might change our obligation here for the recycling?
This recycle program is just the brush pile itself.
Never mind our mulch pile stuff. I forget.
Tub grinding, unfortunately, we have not received anything on the recycling grant yet, so I'm left with no choice but to hold the number the same in hopes that we'll receive the recycling grant next year and cut back the cost.
Got it. Didn't we used to, I guess we used to rent a space for recycling within the city, but we don't do that any longer.
We still have space on the other side of, like Cumming Creek
Right.
on West 3rd Street, where there is a recycling center for plastic bottles, things of that nature.
But we own that, so.
Yes,
there's
we
not
own that
a- There's not
property.
an ongoing cost to the city associated with that.
No, the one you're thinking of was on Railway Street.
Yeah, got it. I was used to that showing up in the budget for a while, so, got it. And yes, hopefully that grant comes through. I thought we'd heard some positive news about it, but I guess not.
We did, but we have not received the official letters, so
Anyway,
makes me a little nervous.
Is that for the card reader?
Yes.
Just the mulch
Yep.
pile, okay.
yeah. which would reduce our,
Yeah.
Right now, we are, monitoring it from 7:15 to 3:15, Monday through Friday. It's open every other Saturday, 9 to 1. So, we're incurring cost of overtime twice a month, but reducing the cost of grinding. And having extra trash to clean up, basically.
Is this upcoming Saturday one of the ones that's so,
This past Saturday.
oh, okay. Mr. Pelisi?
Yeah, again, going back to salaries, how many
19 unionized employees at a 3% pay increase, plus it's all contractual. We have different, I don't want to call them job descriptions, different classifications is what they call it. So I have, for instance, in the streets department, 2 mechanics, 1 that maintains streets and parks vehicles, 1 that maintains police, fire, codes, all of their vehicles. Then I have a welder fabricator. We have 3 foremans in that department. I went from, well, before me, it was 2 administrators. You had the general manager and assistant general manager. When I took over, the assistant general manager was cut. So I went a year and a half, almost 2 years without an assistant. So we, at one point, sat down with the union and created another foreman position within the streets department to be my administrative foreman, take some of the load off. We have 2 operators, because at the time of creating the administrative foreman, we reduced from 3 operators to 2 to try to help absorb the cost of creating the extra foreman. We have 1 laborer, and the rest are all truck drivers in the streets department. Then you have traffic control department, which is actually consumed in this as well. We have a sign maker who has a slight increase over truck driver, but he makes every street sign you see within the city. We have a licensed electrician that maintains every street light, every traffic signal, every electrical issue in every city-owned building, helps with electrical issues at RVT.
Busy guy.
Okay,
I mean, I can share with you a copy of the contract that may help you a little better with the numbers.
yeah, I appreciate it, because I'm looking at,
Yeah,
correct me if I'm wrong, I see an $84,000 increase. That's a 10.25% increase. And I thought maybe we were hiring more employees.
I'm sorry, that's 1 more employee too. That would be adding a 3rd shift sweeper operator.
You're adding in it.
Yes,
so it'd
I
be
apologize.
20 employees, not 19?
Yes, it would be 20 unionized employees in the streets department.
Okay.
3rd shift sweeper operator was cut, 7 years ago. So currently, I'm on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. 3rd shift sweeper operator with help with the MS4, cut back on the overtime of, like, for instance, the storm yesterday into today. I called guys in at roughly 1 o'clock in the morning. If that guy was in overnight, he could start maintaining everything at his normal pay scale and hopefully offset anybody needing to come in till probably 6 o'clock in the morning.
Okay. I was only curious because just looking at the quick figures and doing some quick math, it's
Yeah, I'm
at
sorry.
that increase with no extra employees, you're looking at an average salary increase of
Yeah, I
almost
apologize for that.
$4,500 per person annually.
Like I said, I can also get you a copy of the contract because the pay scales are slightly different per, labor is my lowest paid employee. Foreman is the highest paid, but then right below the foreman would be equipment operator, mechanics, so on and so forth.
Thank you.
And, Mr. Mackey?
I was just curious, the street lighting and trash removal,
Yes.
the 2019 budgeted amount, it appears that we're way under both of those. Could you? I'm just
Yes,
curious.
the trash removal was also, for like, MS4 requirements when they hit to where we actually have to show that everything from the street sweeper goes to the landfill. Currently, we're sifting the debris out of it and hauling basically dirt and dust to a clean fill. But mandates are going to change. We anticipated them changing in 2019, but that hasn't happened yet. So until they force our hand, we're just saving money. The street lighting, we hold extra money in the general fund till the last 2 months of the year, November, December,
Okay.
to help cover the cost of street lighting, because street lighting is also paid for out of liquid fuels. So it's just kind of like a balancing act between the two.
Okay.
Mr. Henderson
The contract services, is this where we have money built in for the law firm to help us with the stormwater agreement?
Yes, that and the MS4 requirements. As some of you may be aware, we have the Water Authority contracted to be our MS4 coordinator.
Right, right. Okay. I just wanted to check that because I know our estimated was 20 for this past year, but we're still up there at 40, but those additional expenses make that up.
Yes.
Thank you.
This is
Will
fun.
that third sweep person also be able to monitor Graphius Run?
Yes, ma'am. They will monitor Graphius Run. They will assist the police department, fire department with any calls that they would typically call me for, and I would have to go in and call someone out because unfortunately I cannot do unionized work.
Thank you.
So it saves on overtime, saves me a lot of trouble, and will helpfully assist everything.
Any other questions on page 25? None? 26 then.
Streets Department continued, gas and oil vehicles, protective clothing, supplies and materials, storm sewer materials, for a subtotal of $82,300. Paint, or other expenditures, paint, traffic controls, hand tools, vehicle repairs, traffic signal repairs, other equipment repairs, facility maintenance, Bowman Field maintenance, repairs to radios, street resurfacing reconstruction, brick street resurfacing reconstruction, street resurfacing, city liquid fuel, or county liquid fuels, I'm sorry, equipment for a subtotal of $337,143. Total department expenses, $2,562,435.
Question? Hearing none? Let's move ahead.
Public
Oh,
services.
I'm sorry.
Vehicle repairs, just a quick, is that for all city vehicles?
No, that's just strictly streets and traffic control department.
Okay, if there's any police department or fire.
Police department has their own line item for the repairs, but then you'll see vehicle repairs actually comes out of liquid fuels as well because the streets and traffic control department fleet is so large.
Okay, I just want to clarify.
Page 27 then.
Public services, flood control, personnel services, salaries, overtime, FICA, life insurance, workers' compensation, pensions, health insurance, subtotal personnel services, $215,346. Purchase of services, water and sewer, light and power, heat, subtotal purchase of services, $53,125. Supplies and materials, gas and oil vehicles, protective clothing, flood control materials, departmental equipment, vehicle repairs, other equipment repairs, subtotal supplies and materials, $39,900. Other expenditures, flood levy certification, MS4 Chesapeake Bay PRP, subtotal other expenditures, $300,000, total department expense, $608,371.
Questions then? Mr. Pelisi?
Under personnel services up at the top, health insurance, it's dropping by $14,500.
Streets and Parks was the first contract, or unionized contract to pay into their health care. Their contribution is on a scale, tier system. So they went from most employees contributing nothing to now paying a percentage.
The significant difference there is there was a retirement in the department. So the individual that transferred into the department has different health benefits than the retiree, therefore reducing the benefits for the year.
Mrs. Fosnot.
For 12 years, I've heard about the Chesapeake Bay Initiative. Is there up, and I hear that we have to give this certain amount of money now to the whole process because cities need to do that. Well, you need to remind them that the city of Williamsport put millions of dollars into a new facility mainly because of the Chesapeake Bay Initiative, that taxpayers already have paid millions of dollars for that facility to deal with Chesapeake Bay. We can't help, we live in a wooded area and there's rain and it comes down and that whatever it is that comes out of the woods that causes the problems in the rivers, we have no control of that, only God has control of that. Could you please tell me, is there a plan somewhere after 12 years for this $200,000 for the Chesapeake Bay?
Larson Design created a pollution reduction plan, and I'll be more than happy to share it with you. It is a 5-year plan which partners us with Loyalsock Township, which did come before council 2 years ago, I believe. We are just waiting for the final approval on the PRP plan from DEP.
From DEP. It's ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. This is a federal, it's a federally funded or mandated program.
Federal mandate, yes, ma'am.
Federally mandated. It's ridiculous. Thank you.
Mrs. Katz.
Water Authority paid for their sewer system as part of the Chesapeake Bay.
A lot of money. Exactly.
Oh, okay.
What we do to try to balance the budget is, 2 years ago, flood control received the final tractor they needed at that point. So now, for the 2020 and 2021, I'm looking at the Parks Department. So we flip-flop back and forth because they're such small departments. So then in 2022, we'll go back to flood control and update their trucks. Then back to Parks. I mean, it's just a way to try to balance out the two departments. It's nice when you only have a 2-man department using equipment, and it's the same 2 guys getting on the same piece of equipment. They maintain them very well. And then you have a 6-man department that, you know, those gentlemen maintain the equipment very well. That's how we got 16, almost 17 years out of a tractor. So it's just a small balancing act between the 2 departments that we try to do to keep the numbers down. Yep.
Other questions? Oh, Ms. Mealy.
I think I just wanted to make the point about the Chesapeake Bay, that the $180 million the Water Authority invested is not all lost. The city does have, I think, 80% of the city's surface area is combined storm,
Yes.
storm and sewer, and that means that most of our municipal waste is being treated by the Water Authority before it enters the river. So that makes a huge difference in what we're contributing specifically to the Chesapeake Bay. However, that does not entirely alleviate our responsibilities for other things that might or might not be. It's the combined sewer is a blessing and a curse, and municipal thinking about the way municipalities should handle it has changed over the intervening 40 years, partly as a result of the Chesapeake Bay Initiative. Anyway, it's a very complicated issue. It's an unfortunate cost, but we have done something to mitigate it, and hopefully we will be doing more, and hopefully we can avoid as much of the cost associated with that as possible, or working with the Water Authority, form a stormwater authority as well that will enable us to at least more equitably distribute the cost of those improvements to the citizens of Williamsport.
Okay, I think we're done. I believe,
I think I'm on the liquid fuels.
liquid fuels.
I think that's the next one on the list there. Page 58.
It might be a good idea for you to explain what liquid fuels is to new council members.
Okay. What liquid fuels is it's the state liquid fuels. It's the portion of the gas tax, when you go to the pump and pump your gas, it's the portion of that tax that comes back to the city. Liquid fuels can be used for anything related to the streets, whether it's stormwater, street lighting, traffic signals, signage, paving, catch basins, anything street-related, and they are very strict about it. There's a process that we must follow to make sure that everything meets the criteria for liquid fuels. As I said earlier, repairs to vehicles falls under liquid fuels, but every vehicle that you repair using liquid fuels funds must be a vehicle that was purchased with liquid fuels money. And every receipt better match up. It's audited every year. Joe's great at entertaining those folks when they come in. But it's a very complicated system. You know, at my office, we have to document everything on PA dot grants. And if you're 1 penny off, it will throw the whole thing back out. And if you don't have it straightened out, you will lose your allocation for the following year. So we're talking almost $1 million that if I screw up on it, we'll lose $1 million. A little background on liquid fuels, but so the state liquid fuels projected revenues, liquid fuels state is $910,555. I'm sorry, I'll read each one of these numbers for you. Interest, $19,500. Surplus appropriated, $90,000. Total projected revenue, $1,020,055. I'm sorry. Projected expenditures, salt and cinders, $85,000. Street materials, $80,000. Street resurfacing and construction, $297,555. Beltway lighting maintenance, $1,000. Storm sewers and drains, $20,000. Equipment purchases, $155,000. Hand tools, $1,500. Light and power street, $275,000. Traffic light and power, $30,000. Repairs to vehicles, $75,000. Total projected expenditures, $1,020,055. Just to help explain a little more, the Beltway lighting maintenance, the 15 spur, even though they're on the highway, the city's still required to maintain those lights, the overhead lights. Reach Road interchange, we maintain all those overhead lights. Equipment purchases, we're actually allowed to use up to $190,000 to purchase equipment. Over the past 3 years, we purchased a new street sweeper, a couple new trucks, a mini excavator. The trend has always been to try to consume as much as we can under liquid fuels to cut back on using general fund monies to purchase equipment for the streets department. But other than that, I'll answer any questions you have.
Questions? Mrs. Katz?
You increased the budget?
Yes, the increase of salt was around $17 a ton this year, which is significantly higher than it's ever gone up at one time. It's, we bid under state contract with, like countywide. I don't know whether it's cost of fuel for delivery or, like when I call the place that wins the bid, you don't really get to talk to anyone. You leave a message on how many tons you want delivered, and they just send it to you. They're delivering it constantly, and I just think the office personnel are so overwhelmed that you really don't talk to anyone. That is to cover the cost of all traffic signals, all street lights, the power for all of that, electricity. Correct. We pay for the lights on the spur. We pay the electric bill for that. We pay for, I just did the count, we're somewhere around 8,000 street lights themselves, the Cobra heads, that does not count the decorative lights. We cover the cost of electricity on every one of those. We get a municipal rate, and as we replace things with LED, we get an even lower rate. Most streetlights are not metered. It's just a flat fee that we pay. But now all traffic signals are metered.
Ms. Mealy?
Two questions related to that then. Do the decorative lights cost more money than the Cobra heads?
No, it's a flat rate.
Okay, I mean, I figured that, but I just
Yeah,
wanted.
it's just balancing out which
We
ones
know
are
they cost
LED,
more
which
to
ones
start.
aren't. And I mean, there's something else to look at. We just added how many on Little League Boulevard, Maynard Street, 3rd Street.
I guess that's the second question then. Do the decorative ones illuminate less than the Cobras?
I'm sorry?
Do the decorative lights illuminate less than the Cobra heads?
It's about the same illumination.
Okay, I mean, in terms of the spread.
Yeah, the spread itself,
So you don't need
yes.
them more concentrated because they don't
Right.
go as far. Okay. They seem to shed plenty of light down in my neighborhood, so.
Little League Boulevard looks like a runway.
Yeah, sometimes a plane's going to try and land either there or on Market Street, and we're going to be in trouble. The second question about the traffic lights is, I know you've told me the name of the company that controls the timing on them, but how does that all work? And if we as a municipality wanted to change the timing on our traffic lights to speed up traffic, to slow down traffic, to, in some way or another, control traffic,
On
is that within our
average,
power?
on average, we're only allowed 4 seconds in any direction. So we could take 4 seconds from north and south and move it to east and west. The other side of it is, like most intersections are controlled by a loop, which is a piece of wire underground, picks up electronic, or metal electronically.
That is to say the lights change when there's a vehicle in front
Right.
of them? Okay.
It's supposed to make it change a little faster. Some intersections use cameras. Now
So we do have cameras at intersections?
right, now they're not, I guess the way I want to say it is they're not viewable cameras. They pick up the silhouette of your vehicle.
Okay.
Pine and Street and 3rd Street, by Trade and Transit, we installed what's called a Grid Smart camera, which is being also installed under the Gateway project at those new intersections. That's one camera that controls the entire intersection versus the other style cameras we have in the city. You have to have one camera for every approach. And from what I've heard from Mr. Nichols' bus drivers, the Grid Smart camera has made it so that the light cycles a lot faster. If the camera's controlling the intersection, then, it can cycle as quickly as the camera picks up. If we're using timing to control the intersection, then that's completely done by PennDOT specifications.
Got it. So most of our intersections at this point are driven by camera, basically by a sensor of some
We're about
description or another.
50/50.
Okay. Interesting. So the timing thing, because, you always hear about cities that, speed limit set at X, and
Right.
vehicles move through, and then the streetlights are timed such that vehicles can't move faster than that down the
Right.
street and not hit red lights every single block.
Now, we do have, I gotta think exactly what it's called. Essentially, all the signals on 3rd Street from Park Street heading east are connected to each other, interconnect. And they're supposed to control the flow of traffic. That's supposed to control the flow of traffic as well. It indicates from one light to the next light how soon it should change.
Got it.
In a perfect world, it would control the speed, but technically, you're not supposed to control the speed of traffic with anything like that nature.
Okay. Because it seems infinitely desirable.
It does, it does.
Right.
Unfortunately, by law, you're not supposed to control the speed of traffic with any signage, signals, anything of that nature, just by the police department.
Well, I mean, you control the speed of traffic by setting a speed limit, but aside from that.
Yes.
Okay, all right, got it. Sorry, we can continue that conversation another time, but thanks, Adam, for the enlightenment.
Mrs. Fogg?
Is there any money in this budget for new street lighting in areas that are dark? There are parts of the city that are dark.
We have what's called the Lights Out Initiative, and it's around $12,000 a year, Joe, give or take, where we put up new LED lights in areas that need lights or need updated lights, whatever have you. I know at one point the focus was through the avenues. We've covered that area. I know we have everything from north of 4th Street, south of High Street, from Campbell Street, all the way to Lycoming Creek has been updated, and lights have been added. This year, we're hoping to stretch eastward from Campbell Street and add some LEDs in there. We try to do roughly 50 to 60 lights a year. But the goal is to add some more.
Mrs. Katz?
All the lights are in the city.
And that was incredible to see, as you said, this is all about where it started. And to see the darkness in parts of our city. But also, I know the mayor at one point really wanted to light up other areas, and the cost was prohibitive, it really was. To do that, but it's really fascinating to see where all the lights are.
I mean, to give you an idea, the Cree Cobra head itself is about $175. The mast arm is around $125, and then by the time you add in wire, you're somewhere probably close to $350 for a light. And then it's the waiting process for PP&L to come out and connect it.
Other questions? We can move on.
I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we're moving to Capital Projects Fund, page 54 and 55. And Mr. Nichols, welcome again.
Thank you. On page 54, we have projected revenues. There's a transfer from debt service that closes out what was on that particular borrowing. There's $500,000 for the levy and $350,000 for City Hall. Again, these are just recognition of revenues that are there, but obviously they need council approval to move forward. The GTRP grant is for Memorial Park, $200,000. And again, you know, what was mentioned before, the transfer from Bowman Field for that project, if it moves forward, the scoreboard, that is $200,000. Transfer Utility Fund, $50,000. Transfer from Act 13 General Fund, $100,000. And again, that's that swap between General Fund Act 13 dollars that we talked about. Transfer from other sources, the RACB, remainder of the RACB funds, $94,000. The commitment from the cross-cutters for the scoreboard, $100,000. Additional contribution or commitment from Ways Garden Commission to finish off the park, the pavilion and the park, $10,000. And then future years allocations from the Bowman Field account, $100,000. And then undetermined Army Corps of Engineers, $750,000, which is a total of $2,454,000 of potential revenue for the projects listed on the next page, page 55, which is the other half of the Bowman Field project, primarily the scoreboard of $644,000. Then City Hall, Fire Headquarters, that's $350 is the remaining funds that could be allocated to whatever City Hall project is approved. The Ways Garden, $10,000. The playground expenditure from the grant, $200,000. And the original budget estimate for levee improvements, the first construction part of related to either relief wells or cross pipes, $1,250,000 for total expenditures of $2,454,000. Again, these are just proposed projects and need to be finalized and come back to City Council for any kind of final approval.
Questions on 54 and 55? Ms. Mealy.
Just one quick question. Mr. Nichols, in the capital projects budget that we passed a couple months ago, didn't your walkways appear there as well?
I'm sorry?
The walkways that you've been seeking funding for, from the 3rd Street parking deck to Trade and Transit 1?
That's in my capital project
Yeah, I saw
budget.
that in your capital projects budget, but it also made it into the general capital projects budget for the city, right? The larger one that we passed a couple of months ago?
No, that was, no, it's just in
Is that
my
just gateway
particular
funding
budget.
that I'm remembering?
That's,
For some
well,
reason I
there's a
thought-
Riverwalk connection project you were
Maybe that
talking
was
about.
it. Okay.
Yeah, I think that was the one with the county that we finalized the contract or the transfer funds from the county to the city to do that project.
Got it.
So
So RVT's capital projects budget, even for something like that?
the
that's
Riverwalk is not in
theoretically-
our, that's in the city's.
Right,
That was in the Gateway project that was budgeted this year.
yeah. I guess I'm just kind of, because we showed a bunch of the Gateway East 3rd Street stuff in the River Valley capital projects budget and the walkway, and then we show some, I'm just curious as to how they interact and whether we show things on both budgets or separately, so.
No, it's just in the Gateway project.
But all of that funding also shows up in River Valley Transit's capital projects budget. It won't be showing up in ours any longer?
For the Gateway?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And why did we move it? Just because River Valley Transit's been managing most of the,
Just to be consistent in terms of auditing, so the funds flow, the grant, because the grants come to us, just so for auditing purposes, they show, you know, even though they're carried on the city books, but they're also in RBT for closeout auditing purposes, just so there's one place as recommended by the auditors.
okay, got it. Yeah, just trying to understand where we should be looking for things. Okay, sounds good.
Other questions? There are none. We can move on to Act 13 Fund, page 60. Mr. Pavlik, welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Not yet. Good evening. For the Act 13 budget, 2020 proposed, Act 13 funding, $450,000. For projected expenditures, the flood levy certification, $50,000. Street resurfacing and rehabilitation, $155,000. And again, Mr. Henderson, this is where the additional 50 is swapped in, and it's bringing it back to pre-2019 levels of the 105. Under general obligation bonds, $200,000, and under the Graffius Run flood mitigation project, $45,000, for total projected expenditures of $450,000.
Questions from council on page 60? Ms. Mealy.
Are we anticipating our, I'm glad to see that we're budgeting Act 13 at 450, even though it came in over that this year. Is there a trend that we're looking out for with Act 13 funding? just in terms of new drilling activity, I'm not quite sure what it relies on, but it's not really continued activity so much as new activity, correct?
Correct. We're trying to keep it conservative. With the conservative number that we had in 2019, we were able to utilize the excess funding for the Memorial Park, all-inclusive playground project. So I think by keeping that funding in there, if something pops up, we have a resource to use.
Got it, but there's not some sort of information from the state for municipalities that gives you some level of projection, it just is what it is?
There's nothing that we know of, that I know of at this time.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, we can move to debt service fund, page 59.
Page 59 for the debt service fund projected revenues. There's a transfer from the general fund of $643,750, transfer from other funds of $152,500, and a transfer from Act 13 fund of $100,000 for total revenues of $896,250. Under expenditures, principal payments on long-term debt, $491,550. Interest expense on long-term debt, $384,700. And interest expense on short-term debt, $20,000 for total projected expenditures of $896,250.
Thank you. Ms. Mealy?
That short-term debt is related to the line of credit that we took out this year?
The recent one for $2 million with CNN, correct. I tried to throw a number in there for any interest expense that the general government may incur related to that borrowing.
Got it. Okay. I appreciate that we booked that separately on the equity statement as well. It just makes it easy to see when we're adding debt. Okay.
Mr. Yoder?
What's the interest expense for the long-term debt?
That's
What, I guess, did that go towards?
the interest and principal on the long-term debt go towards the 2017 general obligation bonds and the 2016 general obligation note, I believe it was, the unfunded debt note that we took out in 2016. And then, as Ms. Mealy indicated, the short term is for the $2 million with CNN that was recently approved.
Other questions? Okay, let's move on to City Hall Operating Fund, page 57.
For City Hall operating, projected revenues, rental income interior, $300,000, rental income exterior, $2,100 for total revenue of $302,100. For projected expenditures, life insurance, $275, supplies and materials, $11,500, telephones, $46,000, water and sewer, $3,000, heat, $23,000, electricity, $35,000, repairs to other equipment, $5,000, facility maintenance, $77,000, contracted service, $50,000, contingency, $35,000, furniture and carpet, $10,000, and machinery and equipment, $10,000, for total expenditures of $305,775.
Ms. Mealy?
The $275 for life insurance, I mean, I know it's nothing, but what does?
Previously, we had an employee who worked specifically for maintenance of this building or janitorial services for this building. He's since retired, so this is his retiree coverage.
Okay. Where's his health insurance?
He does not qualify for post-retirement health care.
Post-retirement health care, okay. Got it.
Just life insurance.
Okay. And my other question is, I know this is the operating budget and the money wouldn't show up there, but we had a lengthy discussion earlier this year about a certain amount of money that we have hidden in the city hall, that we've tucked away in the city hall operating fund for larger renovations to city hall. How much money is in that?
Currently, the cash balance is $575, but I believe that that's before we've transferred any funds in for rent this year.
Got it.
But right now, we're right around 575.
So that's more or less the amount that we're carrying over year to year. What you're saying is we
Correct.
haven't expended anything, like, that's before rent comes in for 2020 and before we have expenses related to
Again, that helps us with the cash flow. We can transfer the money later in the year, giving us the cash flow in the general fund when we need it till taxes and other bills
Got it.
or other receipts come in.
Understood. Okay. And the minor discrepancy between what we're spending and and the revenue we're anticipating is related to the fact that we're running a balance in that account?
It sets money aside for those future to keep a contingency on hand.
Okay, got it. Thanks, Joe.
Other questions on page 57? None, so we're on to unemployment compensation fund, page 56.
Projected revenues, transfers from general fund, $10,000. Transfers from utility fund, $5,000 for total transfers in of $15,000. Under projected expenditures, unemployment claims paid, $15,000 for the same total.
Questions on page 56? Let's move on to pool repairs capital fund, page 61.
Under pool repairs, projected revenues, transfer from general fund, $2,000, and available surplus, $106,914, for a total available balance of $108,914. For 2020, there are no proposed expenditures.
Questions? Hear none, so I think we're done. Thank you, Mr. Pavlak.
Thank you.
I want to announce that our next budget work session will be held Wednesday, December 4th, 2019, 7 p.m., right here in City Council chambers. Upcoming meetings on Tuesday, which is tomorrow, December 3rd, 1 p.m. Finance, 2:30 p.m. Public Works, and 3:30 p.m. Public Safety. And then we will have a regularly scheduled City Council meeting this Thursday at 7:30 p.m. in City Council chambers. Anything else from council tonight?
I just want to thank the people that presented their budgets tonight. You did a great job.
Yes, excellent. I want to thank our very festive decorations, Mrs. Frank and Mr. Grimes with an assist. And they did a great job. It's very nice in here. Mr. Mackey.
Thursday, December 5th meeting, the ad in the paper for the city council says December 12th scheduled.
We haven't, we have another meeting then on the 12th.
As
Yeah.
well.
Yep,
Yeah, it's unfortunate, John, but it's true.
yeah, that's our,
And we're just scheduling, you're just scheduling interviews.
we'll have interviews. The 5th will be the first reading of the budget. We're gonna, the first final reading of the, or first complete reading of
Sorry, I'm not talking about the budget, I'm talking about the city council to fill
The
mayor
interviews.
seat.
yeah, so that'll be included in our regular meeting.
So if you're asking for the information of the public, applications to fill the rest of Mr. Slaughter's term on city council are due to the city clerk no later than 4 p.m. on Thursday, if I'm not mistaken. And then the applicants will be interviewed at our December 12th city council meeting, and the replacement will be chosen as part of our January, will be nominated and chosen as part of our January 6th reorganizational meeting for city council. That was the
Absolutely,
intention,
yeah.
was that the new members of council will be able to ask questions, but also benefit from the experience of current members of council in terms of the questioning process.
Not as many as we asked tonight, but we can still ask questions.
Yeah.
Any comments from the administration tonight? Okay, thank you. From the public? Hearing none, entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.